Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy Fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is the fourth part of What If Luffy Faked Death Using Vegapunk's Time Machine. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The third looked like a classroom debate. Well played, Gatsby. Well played, Luffy ground out. The third mate frowned. Don't call me that. Only Kaya-chan gets to call me that. I could call you some of the other things she does, but Nami told me they're not appropriate for civilized conversation, whatever that means. Say, what is a maso? Wow, it's getting late. And our dinner's getting cold. What say we finish this up? Huh? Usopp interrupted, his soul all but floating out of his mouth as his captain almost asked him about that part of his life. Laboon just hummed, waiting for them to finish so the paint could dry and he could go get some food. Gaiman oh so softly tried to coax the queen to drink from a bottle. She looked a little better already, but years of neglect couldn't be undone in half a day. She looked ready to drop, even though she'd barely done anything. She hadn't had to even move since they'd gotten her. Deciding that maybe rest would be for the best, Gaiman pulled back the water. The party was getting a little loud, so he leaned in close to sing a lullaby he'd used on all the animals at one point. If I had words to make a day for you, he crooned, I'd sing you a morning. Golden and true, he gently petted her head. I would make this day last for all time. Her eyes were already starting to close. Give you a night deep in moonshine. That was beautiful. Gaiman jumped, turning to see the freaky skeleton that the captain liked so much. Gaiman felt it easier to think of it as some sort of exotic creature than a true blue member of the undead. He coughed and tried to hide his blush. It was nothing. No, I'm serious. You have a very nice voice, such a sweet timbre, and something about that song just speaks to you, you know. I could practically hear the orchestra swell. Or maybe a bass guitar and jazz organ. Oh, where are my manners? I am Brook, the musician. And who might you be? Gaiman regarded the hand held out to him warily before leaning to grab it with his own immobilized one. Gaiman, the zookeeper. Brook gave a simple shake before retreating a step. I must confess, I was a little scared to come talk to you, but I couldn't resist the music. Gaiman raised a corner of his unibrow. I scared you. Well, yes. I've never seen someone in a box. I keep waiting for you to jump out and attack or something. Oh, the irony, Gaiman thought. A little ways away, Momo was still shivering. He had the strongest reaction to being introduced to Laboon's digestive tract. He had sought out the black cat he'd been listening to earlier, who was currently patting his head. Hey you guys. I think I'm his favorite, Salem said to his buddies. I'll alert the media, Saberhagen, one of them deadpanned. It's pronounced media. Meanwhile, the Kangasero's cub was in a bouncing contest with Tigefant beneath the watchful eye of his mother while the bear pig ate honey between cowering at the tremors and the rabble tried to break up the foolishness in order to demonstrate proper technique with the donkver watched morosely, making a whistling sound as it breathed through its gapped teeth. In an alternate dimension, the sentient stuffed animals of a certain British schoolboy took a moment from playing in their hectare woodland to sneeze. Nami finished the last bite of her fillet. Say what you will about Sanji and his many flaws, but the man could cook. Besides, this was a prime ingredient in the first place. She could almost forgive Luffy for eating it all to the bones last time. Almost. Hey, aren't we going to get anything? Whined a certain undercover princess. Nami glanced at Miss Wednesday. She loved Vivi, she really did, but she sure could be a bitch while she was in character. You have water and rice, don't you? That's not food. That's barely a snack. Though the closest thing to a saint that Nami was ever likely to meet in her lifetime. It would seem Vivi hadn't gone through a royal upbringing without becoming a little spoiled. Tough, that's all you're getting. Though Sanji would probably whip up a 5-course meal if she managed to ask him directly. The frontier agent grit her teeth. Cold, heartless bitch, she muttered. I'm not a cold, heartless bitch, Nami countered. I'm the cold, heartless bitch. Mr. Nine spoke up. Look, we're really not that valuable to our organization. We're barely above the bottom, to tell the truth. It's highly doubtful that they'll shell out anything for us. And if you're planning on using us as shields or something, you should know that Baroque Works thinks nothing of disposing of members to fulfill the mission. So, really, you'd be better off if you just let us go. Nami gave him a flat look. You'd still keep the bullets off us if they fire. And I think you're more valuable than you think. I'm pretty sure I can get $1 billion for your little partner alone. The acrobatic baseball enthusiast felt his whole body turn white. What kind of woman was this? There's a special spot in hell reserved just for you, he hissed. Yes, there is. It's called a throne. Nami-san. Nami looked away from her horrified captives to look at Kaya. She tried not to jump. She was the scariest girl on the crew. Not Kaya. Kaya was an amateur, a newcomer. She had no idea what Nami could dish out. She didn't bat an eye at the monster trio in a tantrum. She wasn't going to be cowed by some pampered slip of a girl. Denial ain't just a river in Arabasta. What is it? Kaya looked contrite. Listen, I know that I've put you through a lot with my and Usopp-kun's, activities. And even though I paid you, it still feels like I've been taking advantage of you and just being rude anyway. And now that Alvida-san has joined the crew, it just seems far too selfish of me to kick you all out for my sake. So I'd just like to inform you that I relinquish my, bedroom privileges. You will be able to go to bed whenever you want without fear or disgust. My sincerest apologies for all your discomfort up to this point. That's great. Nami smiled, her tone grateful and bubbly. In the same voice, she asked what's the real reason. Kaya's eyes slid closed with a smile, and her entire aura shifted. I've decided to explore the thrills of exhibitionism and the fear of getting caught by defiling every other room and surface on my ship. Once that wears off, I'll impose a ban so that we can only do it on islands. I figure if I deny my little boy and have him bottle it up, it will be even more fun when I allow him to let loose. Good for you, Nami replied, her face green but still smiling. I had to ask. I never would have pegged Usopp as that kind of guy. Maybe she just bullied him into it. And just for the record, Nami-san, I want you to know that I am not a bully. I discipline because I care. Nami felt her blood run cold. This was the sniveling girl that couldn't bring herself to fire a gun at a man she thought had killed a friend and betrayed her. Love brings out the best in all of us, don't you think? The former heiress said airily. Well, that was all the confirmation she needed to never ever fall in love. In fact, a life without love is hardly worth living, I think. Was that a threat? But that's just my opinion. Taking pity on the navigator, Kaya turned to regard the hostages. Are these two giving you any grief? Nami felt her mouth spread into a smile that would make the devil himself whimper like a puppy. Her schadenfreude senses were tingling. Just a tad. And I'd much rather be enjoying the party. I really need to unwind. Oh, you poor dear. I'll take over for you. Go have fun. I know I will. Taking one last look at the faces of the Baroque Works agents rapidly turning blue, Nami walked away. Sorry, Vivi. Better you than me. Now then, Kaya said sweetly. Let's review the proper etiquette for being taken prisoner by pirates. Shall we? The screams could not be heard above the noise of the party. Zeph brought the loaded cracker up to his nose and breathed deeply. That done, he brought it to his mouth, where his highly trained and sensitive palate was flooded with salty, savory flavor. He chewed slowly and with consideration, until his saliva began to interfere with the flavor. After swallowing, he stroked his mustache, mentally reviewing every iota of the sensory experience. Finally, he let out a huff of defeat. Damn it, I still can't figure it out. What is that secret ingredient? Crocus smiled smugly. That dies with me. The two veterans were sitting to the side of all the hoopla, sharing a bowl of Crocus's special dip. So, Crocus spoke up. As the gatekeeper of the Grand Line, he met every pirate brave or foolish enough to tackle the world's most dangerous ocean. Some stuck out more than others. The captain, who was also the cook that insisted on making him a feast as a show of respect, had left a lasting good impression. I was surprised to see you again. Piracy is a young man's game. What convinced you to come along on this cockamamie voyage? Zeph snorted. Who you calling old? I've got another 100 years left in me at least. Besides, we're only as old as we feel, right? Taking another bite of the exquisite spread, Zeph sighed. In all seriousness, it was kind of decided for me. Brat managed to seduce all my men from under my nose. They probably would have jumped ship to follow him if I didn't agree to sail with him. And I figured between the three colors, a certain initial mastery of the 6 powers and a paramecia, enough bases were covered that it wouldn't be total suicide. Then I watched that green-haired one beat Dracula. Anyone who can make someone on that level defer to their will is probably worth following, don't you think? You don't say, Crocus mused. He glanced at the drinking swordsman. I thought that hat looked familiar. How'd someone like that wind up in East Blue with no one hearing of them? Zeph frowned. Believe me, I wonder that myself. There's something off about them. I even started to notice it with my blonde brat, but they don't seem to mean any ill, so I let it slide. Now that you mention it, the brat back from the dead seemed to know they were coming, and for the life of me I can't imagine how they could have ever met. Crocus snorted. Maybe they're all from the future where they were already a crew in the new world. Zeph snorted. Yeah, right. You're getting senile, flower eggplant. Crocus shrugged. Stranger things have happened. Crocus-san. The lighthouse keeper turned to see one of the pirates from this armada looking at him with confusion. He was wearing a very odd hat, with animal ears. Seriously, the things these kids wore nowadays. What is it? He asked gruffly. Well, you see, the kid sputtered. Captain Buggy recognized you. And you said you remember him from when you were on a ship and he was young. Yes, he drawled. He saw where this was going, but he got his kicks from drawing people out on a limb. The thing is, Captain Buggy was only on one other ship before he founded our crew. That's so, yes, and if you both know each other from that time, that would mean you were part of the crew on that ship too, right? I guess it does. The party really was something. Once the men had time to recover from the fact that, yes, they had technically been eaten, they realized that they were now in the Grand Line. All their training and preparations had come to fruition, and they were finally there. It was both a celebration of all that had led them to that point, and the kickoff for the start of a whole new journey. Several things happened during that party. Oh, I almost forgot, Brook exclaimed. He ran over to Crocus's houseboat and emerged carrying a familiar black sheath. I grabbed this for you, Zoro-san. I remembered how much stronger you were once you got it. Zoro grinned like a shark as he felt the heavy weight of Shisui in his hands. Welcome back, he muttered. After thanking Brook, Zoro reached down to belt the sword only to realize his dilemma. Right. Well, I suppose I could work on making a Yontaryu. No, it wouldn't be ready anytime soon. So, one of you has to go, it seems. Zoro thought about it a second. He would die before losing Wado, and Sandai Kaitsu was too dangerous for anyone but him. Yubashiri it is. At least you didn't have to die this time. Zoro used observation for a second, and walked over to Kaya. Oi, you want a decent sword instead of that mass-produced junk? Kaya's mouth twisted into a mow of annoyance. My father commissioned this sword. The blade is folded steel. Gold filigree is laid into the handle, and it's perfectly balanced since the tang is nearly the full width of the blade. Zoro winced, but didn't start to fear for his life. This was Daisy, not Mistress. He'd learned to tell the difference for the sake of survival. It was like dealing with that Cavendish person. Sorry, what I meant is, would you like Yubashiri? Kaya regarded the katana for a moment before shaking her head. No, thank you. Not my style. If I must get a better sword at one point, I'd prefer it be that elephant zone that horrendous leader of CP9 has. Usopp-kun made it sound so cute. Fair enough. Moving to the next candidate. Zoro found him holding his own sword in his teeth while balancing on his unicycle to the cheers of a crowd. Kabaji. In an instant, the swordsman of the buggy crew was at attention and his sword sheathed, his unicycle falling to the side behind him. Yes, Zoro-sensei. Zoro felt a twinge of annoyance. He wanted them to respect him as a teacher, but most of his students' abject worship was just plain bothersome. Still, that was what you get when you claimed the title of world's strongest swordsman before their very eyes. Zoro held out the lacquered ebony of his lightest blade sheath. Brook brought me one of my old swords, so I have one extra. You want it? A hush seemed to fall over their part of the party. Are you serious? Kabaji asked, his eyes almost popping out of his head. The group that had been watching his antics had their jaws around their waists. Zoro shrugged. You're my best student. You deserve a decent sword. What, you don't want it? No. If you think I'm worthy of it, I'll gladly take it. Kabaji reached out and practically snatched it. He then looked down at it in reverential wonder, actually falling to his knees. This blade has drawn the blood of Mihawk. The best swordsman in all the world held it in his hand, and he saw fit to bestow it upon me. This is an immeasurable honor. I shall treasure it all my life, as will my sons, and their sons, and God willing, their sons throughout the ages. This is my legacy. One of the last beams of light from the setting sun seemed to fall upon the chief of staff. The men around him looked at him with awe, as if they were witnessing a miracle. They one and all bowed their heads, thanking their lucky stars that they were able to bask in this holiest of moments. This rare and priceless treasure, the realization of a man's romance. Zoro's sweat drop reached past his hair. Right. Where's the alcohol? Again. Usopp adjusted the magnification on his goggles. Okay, a little more to the left. You want it to be a gentle sweeping motion. All right, just a gentle sweep. Careful of the angle. Luffy huffed and side-eyed his sniper. Do we really have to keep working on it? It's recognizable. That's good enough, right? Hey, you're the one that wanted to make him our official mascot. People will see this image and associate it forever in their minds with the Straw Hat Armada. That's not something you half-ass. Besides, we've already been doing this for 2 hours. What's a few more minutes? Luffy looked longingly at the table Sanji had set up. But the girls are eating all that cool elephant tuna. There's not going to be any left for me at this rate. Come on, I'm hungry. Usopp got an evil glint in his eye. Okay, sure, you can leave it like that. Just know that you'd be leaving your Jolly Roger, the pride and heart of our crew, behind. Just know that you'd have forever marred the face of one of our cherished Nakama by leaving your work unfinished. What would Shanks think of you doing something like that to a friend, I wonder? Luffy had gone very still. Usopp smiled victoriously. So which will it be, Luffy? Your heart, or your stomach? Hat shadowed his face. His whole body quivered as two of his most fundamental desires clashed. His internal war made Marineford look like a classroom debate. Well played, Gatsby. Well played, Luffy ground out. The third mate frowned. Don't call me that. Only Kaya-chan gets to call me that. I could call you some of the other things she does, but Nami told me they're not appropriate for civilized conversation, whatever that means. Say, what is a maso? Wow, it's getting late. And our dinner's getting cold. What say we finish this up, huh? Usopp interrupted, his soul all but floating out of his mouth as his captain almost asked him about that part of his life. Laboon just hummed, waiting for them to finish so the paint could dry and he could go get some food. Gamino so softly tried to coax the queen to drink from a bottle. She looked a little better already, but years of neglect couldn't be undone in half a day. She looked ready to drop, even though she'd barely done anything. She hadn't had to even move since they'd gotten her. Deciding that maybe rest would be for the best, Gaiman pulled back the water. The party was getting a little loud, so he leaned in close to sing a lullaby he'd used on all the animals at one point. If I had words to make a day for you, he crooned, I'd sing you a morning. Golden and true, he gently petted her head. I would make this day last for all time. Her eyes were already starting to close. Give you a night deep in moonshine. That was beautiful. Gaiman jumped, turning to see the freaky skeleton that the captain liked so much. Gaiman felt it easier to think of it as some sort of exotic creature than a true blue member of the undead. He coughed and tried to hide his blush. It was nothing. No, I'm serious. You have a very nice voice, such a sweet timbre, and something about that song just speaks to you, you know. I could practically hear the orchestra swell, or maybe a bass guitar and jazz organ. Oh, where are my manners? I am Brooke, the musician. And who might you be? Gaiman regarded the hand held out to him warily before leaning to grab it with his own immobilized one. Gaiman, the zookeeper. Brooke gave a simple shake before retreating a step. I must confess, I was a little scared to come talk to you, but I couldn't resist the music. Gaiman raised a corner of his unibrow. I scared you. Well, yes. I've never seen someone in a box. I keep waiting for you to jump out and attack or something. Oh, the irony, Gaiman thought. A little ways away, Momo was still shivering. He had the strongest reaction to being introduced to Laboon's digestive tract. He had sought out the black cat he'd been listening to earlier, who was currently patting his head. Hey you guys. I think I'm his favorite, Salem said to his buddies. I'll alert the media, Saberhagen, one of them deadpanned. It's pronounced media. Meanwhile, the Kangasero's cub was in a bouncing contest with Tygefant beneath the watchful eye of his mother while the bear pig ate honey between cowering at the tremors and the rabble tried to break up the foolishness in order to demonstrate proper technique with the donkfer watched morosely, making a whistling sound as it breathed through its gapped teeth. In an alternate dimension, the sentient stuffed animals of a certain British schoolboy took a moment from playing in their hectare woodland to sneeze. Nami finished the last bite of her fillet. Say what you will about Sanji and his many, many flaws, but the man could cook. Besides, this was a prime ingredient in the first place. She could almost forgive Luffy for eating it all to the bones last time. Almost. Hey, aren't we going to get anything? Whined a certain undercover princess. Nami glanced at Miss Wednesday. She loved Vivi, she really did, but she sure could be a bitch while she was in character. You have water and rice, don't you? That's not food. That's barely a snack. Though the closest thing to a saint that Nami was ever likely to meet in her lifetime. It would seem Vivi hadn't gone through a royal upbringing without becoming a little spoiled. Tough, that's all you're getting. Though Sanji would probably whip up a 5-course meal if she managed to ask him directly. The frontier agent grit her teeth. Cold, heartless bitch, she muttered. I'm not a cold, heartless bitch, Nami countered. I'm the cold, heartless bitch. Mr. Nine spoke up. Look, we're really not that valuable to our organization. We're barely above the bottom, to tell the truth. It's highly doubtful that they'll shell out anything for us. And if you're planning on using us as shields or something, you should know that Baroque Works thinks nothing of disposing of members to fulfill the mission. So, really, you'd be better off if you just let us go. Nami gave him a flat look. You'd still keep the bullets off us if they fire. And I think you're more valuable than you think. I'm pretty sure I can get $1 billion for your little partner alone. The acrobatic baseball enthusiast felt his whole body turn white. What kind of woman was this? There's a special spot in hell reserved just for you, he hissed. Yes, there is. It's called a throne. Nami-san. Nami looked away from her horrified captives to look at Kaya. She tried not to jump. She was the scariest girl on the crew. Not Kaya. Kaya was an amateur, a newcomer. She had no idea what Nami could dish out. She didn't bat an eye at the monster trio in a tantrum. She wasn't going to be cowed by some pampered slip of a girl. Denial ain't just a river in Arabasta. What is it? Kaya looked contrite. Listen, I know that I've put you through a lot with my and Usopp-kun's, activities. And even though I paid you, it still feels like I've been taking advantage of you and just being rude anyway. And now that Alvida-san has joined the crew, it just seems far too selfish of me to kick you all out for my sake. So I'd just like to inform you that I relinquish my, bedroom privileges. You will be able to go to bed whenever you want without fear or disgust. My sincerest apologies for all your discomfort up to this point. That's great. Nami smiled, her tone grateful and bubbly. In the same voice, she asked what's the real reason. Kaya's eyes slid closed with a smile, and her entire aura shifted. I've decided to explore the thrills of exhibitionism and the fear of getting caught by defiling every other room and surface on my ship. Once that wears off, I'll impose a ban so that we can only do it on islands. I figure if I deny my little boy and have him bottle it up, it will be even more fun when I allow him to let loose. Good for you, Nami replied, her face green but still smiling. I had to ask. I never would have pegged Usopp as that kind of guy. Maybe she just bullied him into it. And just for the record, Nami-san, I want you to know that I am not a bully. I discipline because I care. Nami felt her blood run cold. This was the sniveling girl that couldn't bring herself to fire a gun at a man she thought had killed a friend and betrayed her. Love brings out the best in all of us, don't you think? The former heiress said airily. Well, that was all the confirmation she needed to never ever fall in love. In fact, a life without love is hardly worth living, I think. Was that a threat? But that's just my opinion. Taking pity on the navigator, Kaya turned to regard the hostages. Are these two giving you any grief? Nami felt her mouth spread into a smile that would make the devil himself whimper like a puppy. Her schadenfreude senses were tingling. Just a tad. And I'd much rather be enjoying the party. I really need to unwind. Oh, you poor dear. I'll take over for you. Go have fun. I know I will. Taking one last look at the faces of the Baroque Works agents rapidly turning blue, Nami walked away. Sorry, Vivi. Better you than me. Now then, Kaya said sweetly, let's review the proper etiquette for being taken prisoner by pirates. Shall we? The screams could not be heard above the noise of the party. Zeph brought the loaded cracker up to his nose and breathed deeply. That done, he brought it to his mouth, where his highly trained and sensitive palate was flooded with salty, savory flavor. He chewed slowly and with consideration, until his saliva began to interfere with the flavor. After swallowing, he stroked his mustache, mentally reviewing every iota of the sensory experience. Finally, he let out a huff of defeat. Damn it, I still can't figure it out. What is that secret ingredient? Crocus smiled smugly. That dies with me. The two veterans were sitting to the side of all the hoopla, sharing a bowl of Crocus's special dip. So, Crocus spoke up. As the gatekeeper of the Grand Line, he met every pirate brave or foolish enough to tackle the world's most dangerous ocean. Some stuck out more than others. The captain, who was also the cook that insisted on making him a feast as a show of respect, had left a lasting good impression. I was surprised to see you again. Piracy is a young man's game. What convinced you to come along on this cockamamie voyage? Zeph snorted. Who you calling old? I've got another 100 years left in me at least. Besides, we're only as old as we feel, right? Taking another bite of the exquisite spread, Zeph sighed. In all seriousness, it was kind of decided for me. Brat managed to seduce all my men from under my nose. They probably would have jumped ship to follow him if I didn't agree to sail with him. And I figured between the three colors, a certain initial, mastery of the 6 powers, and a paramecia, enough bases were covered that it wouldn't be total suicide. Then I watched that green-haired one beat Dracula. Anyone who can make someone on that level defer to their will is probably worth following, don't you think? You don't say, Crocus mused. He glanced at the drinking swordsman. I thought that hat looked familiar. How'd someone like that wind up in East Blue with no one hearing of them? Zeph frowned. Believe me, I wonder that myself. There's something off about them. I even started to notice it with my blonde brat, but they don't seem to mean any ill, so I let it slide. Now that you mention it, the brat back from the dead seemed to know they were coming. And for the life of me I can't imagine how they could have ever met. Crocus snorted. Maybe they're all from the future where they were already a crew in the new world. Zeph snorted. Yeah, right. You're getting senile, flower eggplant. Crocus shrugged. Stranger things have happened. Crocus san. The lighthouse keeper turned to see one of the pirates from this armada looking at him with confusion. He was wearing a very odd hat, with animal ears. Seriously, the things these kids wore nowadays. What is it? He asked gruffly. Well, you see, the kid sputtered. Captain Buggy recognized you. And you said you remember him from when you were on a ship and he was young. Yes, he drawled. He saw where this was going, but he got his kicks from drawing people out on a limb. The thing is, Captain Buggy was only on one other ship before he founded our crew. That's so, yes, and if you both know each other from that time, that would mean you were part of the crew on that ship too, right? I guess it does. Moji gulped. But then, wouldn't that mean? Doesn't that make you? Oh, for the love of God, just spit it out, you furry eggplant. Zeph groaned. A beat. Were you part of Gold Roger's crew? Crocus did not stare. Yes, I was. Doctor, I just tagged along to find out what happened to Laboon's old crew, but that crazy bastard dragged me the rest of the way to the end of the line. Moji nodded, a dazed expression on his face. Then all at once he seemed to reclaim himself and put his fingers in his mouth, giving a piercing whistle. Guys, it's true. In an instant, the spectacled man was mobbed. What does Raftel look like? Were you friends with the Dark King Rayleigh? Can I have your autograph? Help me, Crocus called out desperately, sticking out one arm above the crowd before it was lost as the mob all but abducted him to move him to the rest of his newfound fans deeper in the party. I could, but I won't. Zeph dipped a finger into the bowl of dip and sucked off the ambrosial condiment. That's what you get for calling me old. Jin, Django, and Buggy sat in a circle, empty plates before them and their crews drunk and dancing around them. Jin coughed. Django fiddled with his sunglasses. Buggy adjusted his hat. The awkward level was over 9,000, so Django offered, only to trail off into silence. Buggy hummed. Great party, Jin commented. Sure, yeah. Kinda reminds me of another party. Well, I mean, you've been to one pirate party, you've been to them all, right? MHMM. Actually, I was thinking it was a bit like that party in Kakoyashi. Really? MHMM. Man, that was a wild night, wasn't it? Oh, yeah. Things sure got weird. MHMM. Yeah, the air was deader than the poor soul that told Big Mom she should go on a diet. Jin sighed. Look, about what we did that night. What part of never talk about it ever again did you not understand? Django screamed at whisper volume. I'm not listening to this. Nope, nope, Buggy stated, detaching his ears and tucking them in his pocket. Jin grit his teeth. Look, we need to hash this out. We can't even look at each other. And that's only going to become a bigger and bigger problem from here on out. What happens if one of us is in danger and one of us can save them but we hesitate because of this damn elephant in the room? Let's just get our shit in order, okay? For the Armada. Django looked like he was being forced to eat a live goldfish, but he finally ground out for the Armada in reluctant agreement. Buggy stood up. I can't be here for this. Just talking to these. With that, the detachable man tossed them both one of his ears and vanished into the party. Jin sighed and held the ear cupped in his hand while he spoke to Django in hushed tones. Look, we were all drunk. Let's just put that on the record, okay? We barely knew what we were doing. Django nodded. Right. Booze makes you do weird stuff. And hell, I barely remember it. The hypnotist had to hide a shiver, proving he was lying. Jin decided to take pity on the clearly uncomfortable captain. It's not like what we did was gay or anything. There was a girl there. That's right. That is right. There was a girl there. So it was all about her. We were just a couple of bros teaming up on a nice skank. That's all it was. Django seemed to be searching for an open container. And even the parts where it wasn't even her. That was just getting caught up in the moment. We were horny. We couldn't see straight. It was an accident. Yes, it was an accident. So it doesn't count. And hey, she seemed to like it. So it was still just for the lady. Putting on a show, it meant nothing. Hee, nothing. Django's face looked like a ripe cranberry. I hate Shanks. They heard randomly from the crowd. Yes, Buggy, you didn't have a crush on that other guy. And that night doesn't make you any less of a man. And if it maybe felt a little good, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's supposed to. I mean, that's why guys who are like that do it. Yeah, it was an involuntary response. Simple biology. Just a weird physical reaction. Django was staring at his crotch as if it had betrayed him. Jin was starting to wish he'd never brought this up. And, hey, it's not like it was a crime. And if it was, who cares? We're pirates. We're fucking degenerates. Just some depraved souls free to do whatever they want. We party every night because we know each one might be our last. Got to seize every moment for what it's worth. So there's nothing wrong with something if we all enjoyed it. And we did enjoy. That, right? Well, I guess. It wasn't torture or anything. Django managed. Life is such a joy. Right. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. It was just another fun night. Nothing wrong with that. And we should all be okay with that. 'Cause we're pirates. And pirates have fun. All kinds of fun. Even that kind of fun, and it's okay. We never have to have it again if we don't want. Because we don't have to do anything we don't want, since we're pirates. Here. It's a pirate's life for me. Savvy. Jin breathed out. So, we're all good. Django bit his cheek, glanced at Jin, then off into the crowd, before sighing and looking like he dropped 50 pounds as he did so. Fine, yeah, we're good. We're all flashy bastards. Jin nodded, glad that the issue was finally put to rest. A beat. The devil man blushed. Hypothetically, if we did want to have that kind of fun again someday. There was a crash somewhere, and some of the buggy pirates that still had their wits about them made sounds of distress. Django leaned away. Whoa, bro. You do whatever you want, but I got a girlfriend, man. There was a cackle from the same direction. Jin gave his fellow captain a flat stare. Is that what you call that poor girl you stalk? Seriously, if you want her to notice you, why don't you just hypnotize her or something? Django adopted a wounded expression. What do you take me for? I would never do that. It's unethical. Oh, but it's okay to give her amnesia so often you can set your watch to it. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Whatever, dude. So you're out. What about you, Buggy? Open to indulging in the hedonistic lifestyle of men at sea. Water spouted into the air, as if someone on their back gave a massive spit take. Django gaped. Wait, you're serious? I mean, no judging, but I never would have thought you were. That. Jin sighed. Look, I don't know that I am. I just know I got no shot with Nami. Kaya is taken, the new girl is an unknown, and you apparently have dibs on Kadu. So what does that leave me? Django tilted his head. You do have a point there. And what's that old pirate adage? Take what you can, give nothing back. Yeah, but that's about slack on the lines when pulling a ship into port. It just happens to be worded so it also reflects our general attitude. Whatever, man, forget I said anything. Jin got up and walked away. Once he was far enough away, he brought up the ear still in his hand to his lips. Buggy, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. It's just that Well, that night was the best I ever had. And I sort of can't stop thinking about the possibilities the power to detach things affords. So if you ever feel open to having a little, fun, I'll be waiting. The ear turned vermilion, not the rose quartz of the slightly embarrassed, or the tomato red of the mildly abashed. Vermilion, the color of carnal shame. Jin let it go, and it floated off into the distance. Jin took a deep breath, wondering if the last 10 minutes had really just happened, and looked up at the sky. Why do I get the sense that some unknowable, all-powerful being smoked crack when they decided to mess with my sex life? Because, well, hey buddy, we gotta get out of here, let's go run. Let's go fucking run. Let's run like we're fucking lions and tigers and bears. Woo. The day dawned bright and early. Luffy had woken up the men, spread out between the ships and the shore, fresh as a daisy like always. Men who had tiredly begun to prepare for a hangover workout didn't know whether to be pleased or terrified when their captain said, "No training today, boys. We're going to have our hands full just getting to the first island in one piece." Shishishishi. The captain took a moment to talk to Crocus before they set out. "Hey, you sure you don't want to come along? We're not getting our doctor for like 3 weeks, and Laboon's coming with us, you know." Crocus rolled his eyes. "I promised to look after the whale until the Rumbar pirates returned. And they did. That's my duty done. And I'm too old to keep up with all you whippersnappers." A shadow seemed to pass over him. "Besides, if I went with you, I'd have fanboys." Luffy shrugged. "Oh well, if you're sure. See you, flower guy. Beware the fanboys." "Beware," shouted the possessed ex-pirate. Luffy stretched over to his special seat and gave the command. "All right, everyone, set sail for Whiskey Peak." "Aye aye." Brook waved teary-eyed at a submerging Laboon. "See you tonight, Laboon. Just follow the music. You'll be safer underwater, and we don't want you to terrify everyone who sees us, but I'll still miss you. This isn't goodbye, it's just see you later." Yo-ho-ho-ho, yo-ho-ho-ho. Sanji breathed deeply of his morning dose of nicotine. "I see serious separation anxiety in that shitty Afro's future." "Oh, so now you're psychic, you asymmetric chimney," challenged Zoro. "You want to get even uglier, Scarface? Though I doubt it's even possible." So you admit you're not strong enough to do it, dandelion hair." "No, I'm saying you're so ass-backwards hideous the only wife you could possibly have would be blind. Probably deaf too, to deal with your shitty attitude, seaweed brain." "At least I'd have a wife, you philandering playboy. How many bastards do you have by now? Unless it's all an act and you're overcompensating to hide the fact you're a, what's the word? Oh yeah, virgin." "Gasp, you take that back, sir. Make me virgin." That's rich coming from a guy who's never even looked at a woman and whose most precious possessions are a trio of phallic instruments, one of which you carry in your mouth. How'd you like that? Huh. Guess you like swords more than sheaths? Huh. See, I know you're trying to insult me, but all I hear is jealous virgin, jealous virgin. You want to go, man, you want to go. Sure, I can take 2 minutes out of my day to kick your ass. The two of them were chomping at the bit, ready to go at each other's throats. A delicate cough was made into an elegant hand. The pair froze. "Zoro-san, I believe I told you 2 days ago that your injuries would not be fully healed for a week. You are under doctor's orders not to engage in any strenuous activity in that time. While you might think otherwise, engaging in an honor duel with Sanji-san is, in my opinion, the very definition of strenuous activity. And I know you would not disrespect all the work I have done to aid your recovery by doing anything to exacerbate your wounds. Right?" Zoro's hand twitched, aching to draw his blade. But after she tilted her head, he conceded defeat and took his hand off. No, I wouldn't." The nurse nodded. She turned to her fellow blonde. "And Sanji-san, I wonder at you for provoking him when you knew he was banned from fighting." "I really do." Sanji's face turned bluer than his shirt. Kaya-sama. The thing is," her smile widened, "didn't you have some dishes to dry?" Seizing the out with glee, Sanji all but teleported into the kitchen. Her work done, Kaya went back over to Usopp and watched with fascination over his shoulder as he mixed chemicals to create one of his stars. Off the side, Nami had a bemused expression on her face. "I honestly don't know if I'm bothered that she did it before I could, or glad that there's someone else on board who can defuse those two. What is wrong with me? I'm supposed to be the sane one." Zoro yawned. "Well, if I don't get to fight the swirly brow, I think I'll take a little nap." The navigator's hand reached out with a mind of its own. Zoro's movement was halted by her grip on his shoulder, which was such that she could have snapped his collarbone with a fleck. He looked back over his shoulder, mildly annoyed, only to see a very familiar orange aura around Nami. "Oh, no you don't," she spat, a subsonic growl beneath each word. "Last time, you went into your stupid voluntary coma while the rest of us had to tackle New World level weather right out of the gate. You even had the gall to call us lazy when you woke up to see us exhausted on the deck, with no idea of what we had to go through. Dealing with the seasons changing within the same second. Icebergs, tornadoes, everything short of a goddamn meteor shower or a rain of toads. Well, not this time. You are going to stay up and adjust the sails and run around like a decapitated chicken just like everybody else. Or so help me, I will raise your debt so high you'll be having yourself turned into the Marines for the bounty and having Luffy save you just so you can make a dent in your weekly payment. Do I make myself clear? Zoro would deny it to his dying breath, but in that moment Nami scared him. Yes, Nami let go and was suddenly sunshine and roses. Good. Get up in the crow's nest, you. We need to spot those icebergs, and you can just jump to the mast when you need to. Zoro grumbled as he walked off. Stupid, overreacting witch. How bad could it be? Nami watched him go, looked down at her hand bemusedly before shrugging. Who am I kidding? My sanity was forfeit long ago. Within minutes, the conflicting magnetic fields and climates of the first 7 islands nearest Reverse Mountain showed themselves. Pearl stuck out his tongue. I can't believe it's snowing. I mean, just a minute ago it was all nice and warm. Buggy was in the midst of a panic attack. So it begins, he hissed. Mayasa breathed deeply of the frosty air. Reminds me of motherland. Bleg, what's so nice about snow? Don't you all realize that it's just frozen water? We're going to get wet. And cats hate getting wet. Siam complained at the crew who were making snow angels. You're taking the costume thing a bit too seriously, man, complained an underling. Mo was following Nami's orders to the letter, but as his crew indulged in wintertime fun, he began to wish he could join in. Hey, Nami-sensei, remind me again why I'm not allowed to look up. The sound of a bullhorn screeching as it turned on disrupted the cheery atmosphere. Because common sense has abandoned us all to the whims of chaos. That's why. Compasses don't work here, and there's absolutely no landmarks around. The only thing letting you know your ship hasn't been turned a full 108 IDIC is that little needle in the orb you're holding. The moment you take your attention off it is the moment you, your crew, and your entire ship run shit out of luck. That goes for all of you. I don't care if it starts raining candy or a topless mermaid washes up on deck. You will keep your eye on the log pose. Yes, Nami-sensei, called out her terrified students. Kaya walked up next to Nami, whom despite the weather was still in her usual minimal attire. Are you sure you aren't going a little overboard, Nami-san? The heiress took a sip of her morning coffee, looking downright adorable in her earmuffs and puffy coat. Nami eyed the warm beverage with envy, but she knew that she soon would have no spare time to make it, let alone drink it. Ask me that again in 10 minutes. Nami called out behind her. Oi, Butterfingers, since you're so weak, your only job is to work the helm. So don't mess it up. Got it? Got it? Nami-san, replied Alvida meekly. There had been an incident earlier that involved an overly helpful Alvida who hadn't gotten the hang of her powers and about 60% of the China on board. Suffice to say her new nickname was well earned. Kaya-chan, look upon the artwork of my soul. I call it Snow Queen. Usopp called, standing proud next to a sculpture of snow that was clearly modeled after someone close to the sniper's heart. Oh, Gatsby, it's beautiful, gushed Kaya. Nami Swan, are you sure you don't want me to do just a little snow shoveling of love? Crooned Sanji from within the galley. Yes, it'll get washed off soon enough. Just keep making the snacks to get us through the next few hours while we have the time, she deadpan. I'll make enough to feed 2 Luffys by the time the wind changes. This I swear. Melorine, man, this guy is whipped, Mr. Nine muttered. And cold. Don't they have any kind of heating system? Complained Miss Wednesday. Kaya turned to face them with the sound of a creaking door. Did you two say something? No, ma'am. They both shouted, suddenly rigid in perfect posture. Remind me what you're doing in there again, please. Mr. Nine was sweating bullets. We are staying still and quiet and not making a fuss, as is proper for prisoners to do. And might I say just how generous and gracious wardens you all are, tacked on Miss Wednesday. Her eyes blank as if her life were flashing before her eyes. Kaya giggled, and the sound sent chills down their spines. I'm glad to hear you're being so polite, but you misunderstand. I meant why are you in there, when you could be outside doing work? The two gulped. Because we're hostages, the redhead offered. And hostages are supposed to stay put until told otherwise. The undercover princess guessed. I see the problem. Those are the rules for when we're on land. When we're at sea, hostages have nowhere to run. So for all intents and purposes, they're part of the crew of the ship. And we have a rule on this ship. Kaya held up a finger, the motion filled with all the authority of fate itself. Those who do not work, do not eat. As if on cue, both their stomachs growled. So fast they left an afterimage. The two vanished from the relative haven of the galley to appear on deck. They began to shovel as if their lives depended on it. Hey, watch it. You almost messed up Snow King. It looks fantastic, darling, Kaya called out. Once again just a charming young woman. It had gone from funny to irritating to terrifying and back 3 or 4 times by now. No wall stands in the way of a true lady. Not even the 4th, Kaya whispered to the wind. Gulp. Brooke sipped deeply from his cup of tea, seated at the same table the two had just vacated. The Baroque Works agents had been too polite to react to the skeleton's presence. He sighed. I miss Laboon. Alvida glanced at him. Hasn't it only been half an hour? It goes without saying that the look Brooke sent her was empty. He had no eyeballs. Your point being, Luffy paused from crafting Mr. Snowman 2.0 to look at the sky. His trademark grin split his face. Breaks over. Everyone. The fun's about to start. The flash of lightning and crackle of thunder punctuated his statement. As the sky began to experience static electricity's badass grandpa, the ships were suddenly hit with a fierce headwind. Damn, what's going on? This weather is insane, grumbled one of the peddlers on the Barady. Zeph snorted from his spot by the periscope. This is the grand line. The wind, the sky, the waves, the clouds, you can't trust any of them on this ocean. He paused. Makes for some nice evolutionary conditions. The fish here are some of the best in the world. If I didn't know it would tear, I'd be dragging a net behind us right now. Django was almost blinded as a worryingly close fork made the snow on deck flash blindingly. Why do I get the feeling things are about to get very, very weird? Shemp eyed the huddled forms of the pets. What's with them? It's their instinct, said Gaiman, right in the middle with his precious nakama of 20 years. Instinct? Questioned Moji, who was trying and failing to fend off Richie's attempts to cuddle him like a teddy bear. When animals sense bad weather coming, they sit. Some of the Dawn crew were having pretty serious flashbacks. Woj, you sure you can get us through this time? The charitable pirate shakily nodded. I think so. We have a log pose this time. Can't believe I never heard of those. Nami-sensei said she found them after looking for 5 minutes in Logtown. Jin grimaced. Krieg didn't bother to do any research. He just charged in and trusted his guns an army of human shields would save him. Don Luffy won't ever make that mistake. Yeah, the Don would never charge blindly into a fight and risk the lives of his crew, agreed one of the nearby extras. Luffy sneezed. I sense a disturbance in the voice, as if the entire world laughed its ass off at once, and then bitter ironic silence. Must be a mystery. Nami sighed as the sails buckled and the ship started to veer slightly from the sheer strength of the storm wind. I'd say turn the brace yard, but why waste my breath? In that moment, the wind turned on a dime to come from the side. The storm clouds vanished as quickly as they arrived. The sun came out, and the temperature at least doubled. The first sign of spring, sighed Buggy cheerfully, retreating to his happy place. Butcheye felt his heart beat double time as he desperately tried to calculate how to adjust to the wind without crashing into anyone. Heave like you're being paid for it. Heave or I'll sit on you. Patty spotted something as he tried to keep the Barady's foresail from tearing. Owner, pot of dolphins off the port bow. Should I fetch the harpoons? Dude, you'd eat flipper. What is the matter with you? Demanded Karn, one of the Dawn pirates, one of the oldest and proudest members of the fleet by the name of Frederick, panicked when he spotted something from the crow's nest. Iceberg, dead ahead. Usopp gripped the rail as the waves suddenly tripled in height and made the ship rock. Luffy, smash it. Or Zoro, slice it. Sanji, melt it. Someone do something about the wall of steel hard ice before we crash. On it, Luffy called, raising his leg high as he jumped into the air. Gamu Gamu no Tempest Axe. He brought down his leg with all the weight and recoil of his body, sending what wasn't so much a blade as a pillar of energy at the offending sea glacier, obliterating it to ice chips. Luffy landed, then looked up. Good that I did that quick. This fog is making it hard to see. Zoro felt his eye twitch as he watched the weather experience more shifts than an ADHD squirrel's focus. Okay, maybe the witch had a point. The Barady shuddered as it collided with a submerged chunk of the iceberg that was still big. Breach, shouted the peddlers, as they leaped to their feet to escape the water already up to their ankles. Who said you could stop pedaling, you shitty baby eggplants? Roared Zeph without even looking away from the periscope. He hooked an iron plate from near his shoe up into the air and kicked it with such force that it embedded itself into the wall around the leak, effectively plugging it. The chefs gulped and went back to their bikes. On second thought, drowning was a better way to go than being cooked alive as punishment. The crew of the Bezin Black all fell to their feet as the ship shook. There was much creaking and groaning of wood as the Blitz was forced to bend around the ship, unable to plow through. Watch where you're going, screamed the indignant cats. Give us a break. We're blind in this fog, shot back the harried Yakuza. Gale force winds came from nowhere to blow the fog away. Unfortunately, it also began to tear the sails. Taken canvas, bellowed Nami. Butterfingers, hard a starboard. Alvida grunted as she focused all her strength into tilting the wooden lever only for it to slip from her hands and her to slide across the floor until her head hit the wall. Are you kidding me? She cried out. I've got it, Brooke shouted, putting his full weight into shoving the helm. Unfortunately, as someone light enough to run on water, that wasn't saying much. Miss Wednesday looked into the black horizon with hollow eyes. It's coming, she whispered. Kabaji clutched his new sword to his chest as he witnessed a Class 4 cyclone form and touched down into the water barely a stone's throw in front of them. What is wrong with this ocean? He howled in terror. Do you want the list in alphabetical order or by fucking flashy category? Buggy facetiously hollered, his head hovering over the crew as he coordinated his various parts to help around the ship. Momo seriously considered just swimming away. But what if the scary two legs sent the big blue fish after him? So, crying silent tears of defeat, he kept pace with the ships. The world dissolved into sweat and panic and adrenaline. The Armada sailed through a labyrinth of nautical nightmares, pushing themselves to the limit to keep up with the demands of survival lest they fall short and cross over into the great unknown. Food was a bite of onigiri before dropping it in the rush to the next crisis. Drink whatever rain was caught in your mouth before it was washed down by seawater as a wave washed over the deck and nearly took you with it. Every minute was an age, every second a burning agony as weary bodies cried out for relief. Many a man became convinced that they would die there, in that swirling chaos of wind and waves. And still they pushed on, driven by the weight of their nakama at their backs, and the undaunted laughter of their captain. Nature threw everything it had at them, and they endured, until, at long last, it ended. The 5 ships floated gently, bopping up and down through the calm water, battered and bruised, but still standing. Seagulls flew serenely on the breeze. The pirate coalition, to a man, were laid out flat on the decks. Bodies trembled as oxygen-starved muscles refused to move but overstimulated nerves forced them to anyway. Blood stained the deck from countless blisters that had formed and burst on their hands and feet. Quite a few drooled, too exhausted even to swallow or close their jaws. Zoro wiped sweat from his brow, trying to breathe through the pain of lactic acid setting his mending muscles aflame. Damn, how the hell did I sleep through that last time? If even you don't know, perhaps we're not meant to, moaned Usopp, his head pillowed on Kaya's chest. The heiress herself lay shell-shocked, 1,000-yard stare looking up into the clear, blue sky. She didn't even seem aware he was there. "Oh, my aching bones," groaned Brooke, collapsed into a pile near the mast. "I think I pulled something in my soul." "That doesn't make any sense," snarled Sanji, staring forlornly at the tip of the cigarette in his mouth. Short of spontaneous combustion, he wasn't going to enjoy it. It hurt too much to pull out his lighter. Luffy frowned from his special seat down at the prone frontier agents. "It really is pretty mean of you guys to attack people right after they go through that. I mean, that's just not fair. So this is my lowest point," Vivi whispered to herself, getting a lecture on fairness from a pirate. Mr. Nine was too busy watching the red spots to say anything. The other crews were hardly better off. Worse, actually. They were in far inferior physical condition to 3/5 of the Going Merry's current population. "Anyone have a nice clam I can crawl into?" panted Pearl. He had dumped his shields early on, figuring he couldn't afford to waste stamina lugging them around. His shirt had been lost in a rogue wave, so everyone could see the various claw marks crisscrossing his husky body, souvenirs of his time in the jungle. "If you have the energy to make puns about your name, you didn't work as hard as the rest of us," barked Hustle. Django sighed. "You know, it's times like these when I regret not fucking off to an island somewhere, hypnotizing the locals into thinking I'm their god, and living carefree for the rest of my life. You know," spoke up Whiskers, "the Kimate tribe of cannibals believe that any god that walks the earth must be trapped in mortal form. Thus it is their duty and honor to release them from their fleshy prison." Django gulped. "Never mind. If I never see a storm cloud again, it will be too soon," Larry whined piteously. Buggy's hat shadowed his face. "You think that was bad? There's an island in the New World where it rains lightning." Larry chuckled, thinking his captain was trying to distract him from his pain by making up a ridiculously worse thing to compare it to. "Right. And is there also an island where you can run on the wind?" A blue mist seeped from Buggy's pores. "You think you're joking?" Katu's eyes hurt to blink. "Oh yeah, I'm definitely digging into my stash of kratom tonight." In the bowels of the Barady, a cook named Lance, known for his strong arm and tenderizing meat, was the only one still pedaling. I think I'm starting to like this cycling thing." "What are you on, dope?" growled the other 15. Zeph climbed the stairs to the restaurant level, to find the whole place in complete disarray. Shattered porcelain was strewn across the floor, and the chairs had somehow arranged themselves into a barricade at the door, blocking the cooks on sale duty from coming back in. "I'm not paying for this," he muttered. Nami felt the sudden urge to cut off the next mustache she saw. Shaking her head at the random thought, she searched for the bullhorn. Finding it somehow in the heart of her tangerine grove, she called out to the rest of the Armada, "Sound off. Who's not dead?" Over 300 groans sounded back. "Shake it off, boys. The worst is over." That was 7 islands fighting each other. From here on out, it's only going to be 2 or 3. The majority of the exhausted men perked up at that, until the second half of the Grand Line, where the power and range of each island is exponentially greater. And we may literally wind up surfing a tsunami in order to escape a flaming whirlpool. The ripple caused by all the pirates slamming their heads against the deck actually generated a decent wave. But that's not for a while. And it stabilizes around each island, which is why we're all enjoying a lovely summer day. Land ho, boys. Say hello to Cactus Island. The armada staggered to their feet. They all looked at the horizon and were treated to their first glimpse of a Grand Line Island. That's a funny-looking island. What big cacti. We might be here a while the log sets. Don't you hate it when you have to use the same word twice in a row? I don't know about that, but didn't Nami-sama mention those two that tried to attack Laboon were from here? If we're using them as hostages, that must mean the people there are pretty hostile. Can you imagine the kind of tequila you could make from those buggers? Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday eyed each other. As one, they sprung to their feet and dashed for the railing. Thanks for the ride, honey, she called out. Bye-bye, babies, he tacked on. The two leaped, going into textbook diving position, their escape all but complete, only to be yanked out of the air by two rubbery limbs. The Baroque Works agents found themselves jerked back into the crushing grip of something too strong to be called a hug. Why you trying to run, guys? Don't you want to introduce us to your friends? You wouldn't want to miss the party we're going to have, right? Shishishishi. Transparent copies of themselves seemed to fly up and out of the two of them. See, they had forgotten one crucial fact. Luffy was Kaya's captain. They were dead. So dead. Like OMG dead. Oh dear, it seems the lesson didn't take. We shall have to remedy that. The pair turned the sickly gray of a corpse. Correction, they were dead and buried. What's that I hear? My hostages tried to make a break for it before I could ransom them. A blue and an orange puddle seemed to ooze out of Luffy's arms onto the deck. Further correction, they were dead, buried, decomposed, reincarnated as grass, that grass eaten by a cow and about to be shat out as manure. Some days, it just doesn't pay to attempt a jailbreak. 5 ships sailed up the river mouth into the depths of the island. A light mist obscured the air as the cool water reacted to the sun-warmed rocks. Through the gloom, scouts noted the skull and crossbones and sent messages to their base to prepare. They emerged into a bay, the mist cleared, and they were greeted by raucous cheers. Welcome to the Grand Line. Pirate cruise, welcome. Welcome to the town of celebration, Whiskey Peak. Pirates are the coolest. Long live the heroes of the sea. Banzai. While some of the more gullible among the armada actually fell for it, a strategy meeting took place on the Going Merry. How you want to play this, Captain? Eat all their food, drink their sake and head off the ambush. Or beat them, steal their food, and drink their sake anyway. Luffy stuck out his tongue. Veg is first to get them out of the way. Let's kick their butts. The bomb guy and umbrella girl will walk into a party. In that case, may I have the honors? It's been quite a while since I've fought a large group, and I'd like to test something out, requested the musician. Ew, I want to watch. Take it away, Brooke. Brooke opened his violin case, drew out his beloved instrument, and settled it into the crook of his neck. Instead of reaching for his freshly rosin bow, he instead drew his sword and laid the central ridge against the strings. May the dead walk in their masquerade, the skeleton intoned. March Funeber. The Soul King began to play. The bounty hunters paused in their charade. What was that noise? It was beautiful, but haunting. Actually a bit creepy. The very world seemed to blur out of focus. Igaram, or Mr. 8, blinked. He looked around in confusion. Where had everyone gone? He was standing alone in the center of town, when just a moment ago he could have sworn he was surrounded by his fellow bounty hunters. And wasn't it daytime? But the full moon, shining luminously down on him, said otherwise. What was going on? A wrestle. Igaram jerked his head to the side, heart pounding wildly. Wait, why was he reacting so strongly to this? His eyes searched the area for the source of the sound, but his eyes could not penetrate the darkness. In fact, it was hard to see anything. Bright as the moon was, the shadows stretched long across the ground. Wherever it pulled, it seemed to coalesce into an opaque mass, nothing like regular shade. It was almost dreamlike. An echoing voice tickled his ear, as if he were hearing something from a great distance. It's close to midnight and something evil's lurking in the dark. The captain of the Royal Guard of Arabasta tensed. What was that? But it had a point. Those shadows looked awfully intimidating, and Igaram couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, the way a fox watches a hare. Every sense for danger he had was dialed up to 11. His eyes flitted all around him, looking for any sign of movement, ready to move or attack at a moment's notice. Under the moonlight you see a sight that almost stops your heart. It came out of nowhere. 2 glowing green lights appeared in the alley nearest him. Igaram gulped. He brought his hands closer to his necktie, ready to activate the guns hidden in his hair. You try to scream, but terror takes the sound before you make it. The lights moved, and Igaram saw them head on. He froze. It was like when a deer looked into the eye of a mountain lion, or a mouse into the eyes of a snake. That terrifying moment of clarity when you realized something wanted to eat you and you were powerless to stop it. Coppery blood flooded his mouth and he realized he bit his tongue. He tried to call out, but his throat couldn't seem to work. He blinked, and the creature appeared before him. Green mist floated and clung to the skeleton. Tattered clothing hung on it, as if it had died in them and never bothered to change. Harsh green light burned in its empty sockets and shone between its teeth. Its hands, like claws, reached out for him. You start to freeze as horror looks you right between the eyes. The creature rasped. Igaram couldn't breathe. His heart had stopped. His limbs were stone. He was terrified. You're paralyzed. This Monday panted in mixed panic and exertion. Zombies. Zombies everywhere. Desiccated bodies shambling towards her, moaning hungrily as they gazed upon her living flesh. She'd knocked them down, one after the other, but still they came. Bits falling off, the miasma of rot rising like a cloud off their necrotic forms. They came at her like ants overwhelming a grasshopper. The female bodybuilder punched so hard at one that its head flew off into the distance, but still its arms grabbed at her, trying to drag her down so its brethren could subdue her. She shook it off and, seeing no other choice, ran into a nearby house. There wasn't any tactics to it, she just ran. Away from the zombies, away from the monsters, away from the fear. She ran up the stairs and made for the first open door she saw, collapsing into a gasping heap once she entered the room. She tried to calm her racing heart and mind enough to figure out what the fuck was going on. You hear the door slam and realize there's nowhere left to run. There was a concussion of sound as the door she'd just blown wide open returned to a locked position, complete with the scream of rusty hinges. Miss Monday jumped and turned. She dry swallowed when she saw the door. She reached out and tried to open it, but even with all her strength it refused to budge. She really put her back into it, and the doorknob broke off in her grip. You feel the cold hand and wonder if you'll ever see the sun. The frontier agent looked around the room, desperate to find escape. Ice crept up her spine as she realized she was well and truly trapped. There was only one door and no windows. The only light was from a crack in the clay roof. That horrible feeling of being in a cage, a cave, a box with the walls seeming to edge closer every time you looked suffused her. You close your eyes and hope that this is just imagination. The dark-skinned Rosette curled into a ball. She pressed her face into her knees, blocking out the sight of the room. What she didn't see couldn't hurt her. If she couldn't see it, it wasn't real. Go away, she begged in her head. Just go away. But all the while you hear the creature creeping up behind. Footsteps echoed in the room. Miss Monday curled up into an even tighter ball. A hand colder than death touched her shoulder. You're out of time, she heard whispered not an inch from her ear. A piercing scream echoed throughout the night. The Straw Hat Armada watched with shock, admiration, and no small amount of fear as the denizens of Whiskey Peak went mad, wonderfully, hideously, indescribably mad. Some of them fell to their knees and started to scream. Some of them just locked into place as if petrified. Some turned on the others and began to viciously attack. And some were cut down by their own musician, walking amongst them without a care in the world. As he passed his audience members, he cut them down so swiftly and smoothly that his music never wavered, continuing to trickle through their ears and into their souls. They saw only what the Soul King wanted them to see, heard what he wanted them to hear, felt what he wanted them to feel. When the last of them fell insensate to the ground, Brooke ended his song with a tapering decrescendo before lifting his blade from his instrument as gently as a mother bathing her child. He tucked the violin into the crook of his arm as he held his sword up in a salute and bowed. Thank you for listening, he told the routed Baroque Works millions. Alvida bit her trembling lip. If I show him my underwear, will that stop him from doing that to me? She asked. Luffy frowned. He won't ever do it anyway. You're Nakama. We play pranks, we roughhouse, but we never aim to really hurt each other. Tell that to them, Usopp grumbled, hooking a thumb at the cook and swordsman, who were estimating how much quicker they each could have done what Brooke had and how much better it would be than what their rival could do. Django gaped at the display. That many subjects, each experiencing their own individual multisensory illusion simultaneously while moving. This weirdo is my god. Zev stroked his mustache. If any man hears the singing of the sirens, his wife and children will never welcome him home again, he quoted. Jin gulped. If I am a devil, that man is Satan himself. Scary, sobbed some of the buggy pirates. Gaiman cleared his throat. You know, he told me that I scare him. Gaiman found himself at a much higher elevation than he was used to as the clowns held him up like some kind of idol or talisman against evil. Our savior, they cried. Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday tried to piece together their shattered minds. 100 millions, including 2 frontier agents that outranked even them, all defeated by just one thing. And if the way it acted around the ship was any indication, it wasn't even the strongest on the ship. And there were 5 ships. Hey, you think the officer agents could take these guys? Mr. Nine asked. Vivi had a shrewd, calculating expression. If one who knew her was to look into her eyes, they would see the faintest spark of hope. Maybe. I meant all at once. Me too. Luffy called out in his natural overloud volume. Brooke, good job. Everyone else, time to dock. Gather them up. Tie them up so they don't run soon as they wake up. Then help the mustache guy and the cooks find their food. Nothing tastes better than someone else's food. Trust me, you would know, growled every original Straw Hat member. Consciousness was slow in coming. It didn't return all at once, but rather in stages. First, there was heat, a harsh, roaring heat from the front, and a gentler one against his back. At the edges of his body, like the top of his head, there was a tingling chill, pleasant in contrast. Next, white. His closed eyelids barely managed to keep out a glaring brightness, one that flickered erratically. Then there was noise. It was pure cacophony. Men shouting, feet stomping, half a dozen different tunes clashing with each other and yet somehow harmonizing into the sound of fun. Igaram finally opened his eyes. With the ease of long practice, he assessed the situation around him. He and the rest of the inhabitants of Whiskey Peak were all in the town square. A roaring bonfire lit up the center, around which danced the most varied and inconsistent group of humanity Igaram had ever seen. He saw clowns, furries, men who looked like gourmet chefs, stereotypical starving thugs, and what looked like an animate potted bush. They were drinking, laughing, singing, basically enjoying themselves with total abandon. Igaram had never seen such unrestrained revelry. It was almost frightening, such total loss of control or propriety, and yet strangely fascinating. But they weren't totally careless, as Igaram soon realized. He and the rest of Baroque Works were all bound with rope around the ankles and wrists. Also, he spotted at least 24 of the partiers who never took their eyes off of him and his comrades. Igaram almost had a heart attack when he spotted his princess. She was sitting down, stiff as a board, at the edge of the square. A rather scandalously dressed redhead was leaning against a wall off to her left, and Igaram noticed how Vivi's eyes kept flickering to her. As someone that had cared for her since he'd first heard her cries echo through the palace, Igaram had no trouble seeing the fear in her eyes. How had this happened? One minute he was preparing to ambush yet another pirate crew as part of his cover. The next he, his princess, and his allies were at the mercy of complete strangers. As head of security, Igaram was trained to deal with things suddenly going south. Still, he was at a loss over how things had instantly gone from peaceful to straight-up FUBAR. Igaram was snapped out of his mental flatline by the single most horrible noise his ears had ever had the misfortune to interpret. It made nails on a chalkboard sound like a hallelujah chorus. After 3 seconds, he would gladly have hit his head with a sledgehammer just to escape the torment of the auditory torture. A white handkerchief divided by don't let him find you. Runaway divided by a white handkerchief divided by don't let the octopus get you. Watch out for the ink. Divided by a squid came 2 divided by that's the ink again. Divided by a white handkerchief divided by it's the all-inked black handkerchief of happiness. Shut up, roared Igaram, the millions, the pirate crew, and the planet itself. Yo-ho-ho-ho, forgive me, everyone. I was just following Luffy San's orders. He wanted to talk to our prisoners. Oh, I mean our guests. Please, pick up where you left off. Perhaps a party song to get us all back in the mood. The air was suddenly filled with requests for particular songs. Igaram managed to tear his eyes away from the talking skeleton responsible for scarring his eardrums for life only when one of the more obnoxious voices he had ever heard shouted "Oi, twirly-haired guy," and the rest of the Baroque Works dudes. Igaram turned towards the voice and felt his face turn blue. As a frontier agent charged with fleecing rookie crews for all they were worth, Igaram kept himself abreast of the major bounties of all 4 blues. Even if he'd only had a passing interest, though, he'd have recognized the young man before him. It wasn't every day that a rookie got his own article in the global section of the newspaper and not just the local for the region. Tan face with a little boyish roundness still present and scar on the left cheek. Open red cardigan and jean shorts tied with a yellow sash. A broad straw hat with a red ribbon at the rim. This was Straw Hat Luffy, the man with a higher bounty than crocodiles before it had been frozen. Sometimes, life screws us over. In this case, Igaram felt like he'd been bent over and the universe had rammed its fist so far up there it lost its watch. The plan had seemed simple enough. Infiltrate a criminal organization, work up the ranks until in a position to divine the leader's identity, return to Arabasta and bring the might of the Nefertari name and throne down on the wrongdoer. Never had Igaram or the princess accounted for the possibility of running into an even bigger threat than the man orchestrating a civil war. Fish roll head. Iga something. Anybody in there? Igaram felt someone poking his head. He shook himself to get rid of it, and refocused on the man before him. He heard some of the millions mutter something about stretching behind him, but he paid them no mind. Why, ma. Yes, what is it? You're the guy in charge, right? Can you order all your guys to settle down and listen to what I have to say for the next few minutes? Normally, Igaram would pull the distraught mayor act and deny everything. But these people had the princess. They'd probably gotten everything out of her already, about Baroque Works at least. So he was totally honest. It is true that I and Miss Monday are the ranking agents here. However, However, all orders come from the boss. I can't actually order them to do anything. Don't worry, though, we're listening, he said, while the millions muttered and whispered right behind him. The pirate gave him a deadpan. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Well, not really. I don't feel that mean. What to do? He scratched his chin before bonking his fist against his palm. I got it. Boy, Zoro. Do something intimidating. Hey, can't you see I'm drinking here? replied a freakishly scarred man in a green robe. He laid down a wine barrel as big as he was, which he had been drinking straight from the plug hole. Miss Monday was mildly impressed, being the best drinker on the island. Oh, come on. I'm not asking for a light show or anything. Just a little something to get these guys' attention. Captain's orders. He tacked on, pouting like a child. Fine, fine, grumbled the man. He stood up and turned to face one of the cactus rocks that gave the island its name. He drew a sword with a black blade, just one of the three belted to his waist. Igaram noticed. He held the sword above his head in a standard high stance. Itoryu, Baki, he called out, bringing the sword down in a vertical slash. There was a whoosh of displaced air, oddly louder than it should have been, and then the unholy thunder of a rock slide. Dust rose from nowhere to obscure the rock the greenhead had aimed at. But there was no way he was to blame, right? He'd been several hundred feet away. Igaram had heard of so-called flying blade attacks, but surely no one could make one powerful enough to. Igaram felt his jaw dislocate as it dropped until he felt the ground brush his chin. The dust had cleared. The cactus rock had been split in half, right down the middle, as if a knife the size of the moon had carved its way through. As he watched, little pieces of rock fell off the sides of the brand new cliff to tumble towards the ground. Straw Hat giggled. Shishishishi. Thanks, Zoro. So, he said, addressing Igaram again. You guys going to hear me out now? Igaram slowly closed his mouth and cleared his throat, without his usual lyrical flourish. We are listening, he answered, sure that he spoke for every agent behind him. He glanced once more at the reformed piece of the landscape, intently. All right, attention, Baroque works, shouted the pirate captain, seeming to almost swell with all the air that went into the yell. My name's Luffy. Nice to meet you guys. To those of you who don't know me, I'm the captain of the Straw Hat Armada, and I got a proposition for you guys. Miss Monday spoke up. What does a pirate want with a crime syndicate? He narrowed his eye at her. Well, if you'd stop interrupting me, I'd tell you, he retorted childishly. He even stuck out his tongue. This was the kid worth 99 million. Then Igaram looked at the ruined hill again. Oh, right. This kid was in charge of the guy that did that. He could be as childish as he wanted. Okay, so here's the thing. Baroque Works is an organization that specializes in theft, bribery, bounty hunting, and even assassination. Not very nice things. But the reason you do them, assuming you're not a total jerk, is because you've all been promised a place in a quote-unquote ideal nation the boss is going to create. If you work hard, the better your position will be in this ideal nation. So, basically, you're all crawling over each other to steal the most loot, bring in the biggest bounty, and complete the most mission. All for the promise to stand on top in this ideal nation. I got all that right. Igaram gulped. He had a bad feeling about this. Essentially, yes, that's why people join Baroque Works. MHMM. And that all sounds great. But I just got one question for all of you, Luffy drawled. Why are you all idiots? What? Screamed the indignant millions. It's not idiotic to strive for paradise, shouted one. To go from street trash to nobility in a perfect land. That's my dream, called another. If we work hard, the boss will reward us well, yelled a guy near the front. There, Luffy called, pointing at the last one to speak. Right there. That's what I'm trying to get at. The boss will reward you, you say. The peon nodded. That's right. Really? Luffy asked doubtfully. How do you know? You ever meet this boss guy? The millions seemed to shrink. No. I've never actually met him. But do you even know his name? Or what he looks like? Well, no. None of us do. That's one of the biggest rules of Baroque Works. Right. You lie and cheat and kill for a man you can't even be sure exists. Doesn't that sound just a little silly? None of you know each other's names. You all have a code name and nothing more. Sure, it's cool and can make you all feel like spies. But it also means none of you can sell anyone out to the Marines or anyone else. Doesn't that seem a bit suspicious? You see, you're all doing this to get into an ideal nation. A place with no hunger, no poverty, no violence or war. But you're supposedly building it with crime and extortion. Doesn't that sound the tiniest bit counterintuitive? The poor million didn't even respond. In the slightest lull in the sound of the party going on behind Luffy, Igaram could have sworn he heard I can't believe he knows big words now. Luffy took a breath. Let me let you all in on a little secret. One of my nakama is hidden very high in Baroque Works. She knows the boss's real plans. He's using Baroque Works to engineer a rebellion in Arabasta with planted evidence framing the king. He's going to use this rebellion to cover up a coup. Luffy shook his head. Do you get it now? This boss is just using you all to make himself king. And once he is, Luffy frowned. What's keeping him from killing each and every one of you to cover his tracks? Igaram looked down. He wished he could say he was surprised, but then he'd had a low opinion of Baroque Works going in. And even as a Shichibukai crocodile was known for not caring whether he brought pirates in dead or alive. But the millions were different. Most of them had seen Baroque Works as a chance at redemption. One last round of ugliness before leaving it all behind to stand in the sun. The crimes they committed were seen as the ends justifying the means. To hear that it was maybe all for naught, he could hear their denial and sorrow behind him. Seriously, what's stopping him? You going to run to the Marines? They'd just throw you in prison for everything you've done for him. And forgive me for saying this, but most of you wouldn't be missed if you just vanished. He needs you to reach his goals, so he keeps you around. But once he has what he wants, you're all just going to be a bunch of liabilities. Even with the code names, the very fact you know Baroque Works exists makes you a loose end. And a guy clever and ruthless enough to set all this up didn't get there by leaving loose ends. He might keep 1 or 2 officer agents that prove their loyalty, but the rest of you will be hung out to dry. In the worst way. Higaram heard the prisoners behind him shout out, calling Luffy a liar, saying he had to be wrong. He also heard sobs as some felt the ground yanked out from under them, the one ray of hope they'd had in a long while snatched away. He felt the hatred in his heart burn a little brighter. These people may be criminals, but they were people, and he knew the boy spoke true. Crocodile would throw them away like trash once he was done with them. He was willing to have hundreds of thousands kill each other to achieve his sick goals. What was another 2,000 underlings? Luffy grinned, his eyes shadowed by the brim of his hat. And that's where I come in. The millions looked up at the man that had shown the truth behind their false hope, and was about to offer the real thing. I need Nakama to help me on my journey. Now, I know what you're going to say. Why should we follow you? Right? Just because I made you guys want to quit Baroque Works doesn't mean you're going to want to join me. Well, I'll tell you why. Because I, too, am offering you an ideal nation. Only mine isn't some mystery far-off land. It's one you've all known of your whole lives. You've just never truly been there. The millions leaned forward with bated breath. My ideal nation, Luffy declared, is the sea. A place where every man, woman, and child is considered equal. A place without politics and mind games, without division and segregation, without borders or boundaries. A place where everyone is your friend, because you are all united by a common purpose. Where all work is honest work, measured by the sweat of your brow and the strength of your back. A place of free men and freedom. They all sat enraptured, the power of a king's words bewitching them all. But no nation is without its enemies. The sea and those who embrace her are considered enemies of justice. We, who refuse to bow to their rules and restrictions. We, who live every day to the fullest. We, who seek adventure and dreams and nothing else. Why? Because we believe something they do not. No, we are their enemies because they do not control us. They fear any who won't obey. And so they condemn us to death, call us pirate and scum, for no other reason than because we refuse to follow the path they set out for us, because we decide to make our own, because no one has the right to tell us what to do. Luffy held out his arms as if embracing the people of Whiskey Peak. I embraced the sea. My Nakama did the same. And so we formed this armada, so that we may stand strong together as we set out to find our dreams and see all this world has to offer. Our lives are hard, make no mistake, but we live. And that makes it all worth it. I stand before you, truthfully without any regrets, because my dream is to become the Pirate King, to know the sea better than any man alive, to know true freedom. Luffy smiled, a genuine warm smile that shone brighter than the sun. So tell me, my friends, will you join me in my ideal nation? The members of Baroque Works were one and all speechless. Take your time. This is a serious decision, one which will affect the rest of your lives. So, I'll leave you all to eat. And when you're done, you can each decide whether you want to be part of my armada. Those of you that don't will be free to go. Just know that if you try to start anything, we will finish it. Oh, and in case any of you are worried about Baroque Works coming after you for leaving, just know that I take care of my own. And with that, the pirate known as Straw Hat turned and vanished into the writhing mass of the party. Igaram sucked on his dry tongue. By the gods, he had sworn his life to his king and princess, and even he'd been moved by the boy's offer. He could only imagine how much more effective it had been on desperate goons with nothing to lose. At that point, a few of the cook types came forward with steaming bowls of soup. There was just enough slack on their wrists that they could bring the bowls to their lips without spilling it down their front. The first million to get his took one sip and exclaimed, "Oh my god." The cook who'd given it to him grimaced. Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Normally we're a lot better than this, but we're cooking only with the ingredients we found in town, and a lot of them weren't the best quality. Wait, what are you talking about? Sputtered the man in the midst of gustatory orgasm. I'm apologizing for this not being up to our usual standards, sir. Your usual standards. You mean for parties and celebrations, right? No, I mean in general. The only real difference between a feast and an ordinary meal is the amount of food prepared, not the quality. The man was gaping. You're telling me you guys eat better than this every day? Of course, we're chefs of Bear 80, the finest restaurant in the world. It would be a crying shame if those we catered to ate anything but the best of the best. The million took another sip and almost went cross-eyed. That settles it. Forget that little speech earlier. I'm joining for the food. By this point a few others had been served, and if their expressions were anything to go by then they shared the sentiment. Igaram took a sip from his own bowl and erupted in goosebumps. This tastes as good as terracotta's cooking. Some traitorous part of his brain claimed it was actually even better, but married men learned to suppress such thoughts early on. A half hour later, Luffy returned to the group of captured syndicate members, most of whom were still blissed out on the ambrosia that was the recipes of the red and black legs. He chuckled when he saw their dazed expressions. It was so nice to see people right after they first tasted Sanji's cooking. For a brief moment, they enjoyed food as much as he did, and these guys had only gotten soup. Wait until they tried the meat. Well, what little didn't go to Luffy himself. So guys, time's up. You've all had some time to think. Which will it be? Are you cutting loose and running away? Or are you going to become my nakama? He paused for a moment, letting the choice he presented settle in their minds. Those of you who choose to stand beside me on this journey across the sea, raise your hands. Igaram looked behind him. More than half of the millions had raised their arms. Igaram was both happy and sad to see Miss Monday among them. He'd miss her. She'd been a good woman despite her line of work, but she was definitely going to be in good company. Luffy grinned, and his right leg seemed to blur for a moment. The next second, all those that had raised their hands lowered them, looking with awe at the rope falling from them. Igaram was stumped by that one. Throwing knives. No, there'd been no sounds of impact on the walls behind them. There was no noise, so it wasn't bullets. He remembered what this young man's swordsman had done and considered the possibility of flying blade attacks. But a cut with a sword was one thing. Displacing air so sharply from a kick, let alone over 50 times with perfect aim in a heartbeat, was surely impossible. Right. A smile that seemed like a mischievous cousin to the one they'd received earlier graced Luffy's face. Welcome to the party, you guys. Untie your legs and join the fun. I'll get to know you all one-on-one a little later. Luffy waited until the 73 that had chosen to defect from Baroque Works had left, giving each of them a nod or wave as they passed him. He turned to regard the remaining 26 and Igaram. I'm sad you don't want to come along, but I'll respect your decision. My crew will let you go individually and make sure you leave. I repeat, anything you start will be finished. Quite strongly, he added. Then he walked forward and kneeled in front of Igaram. So, curly-haired guy, mind telling me why you didn't want to sail with me? Igaram gulped. Why was he getting special attention? Was it just because he was a numbered agent? It's nothing It's nothing personal, Luffy-san. It's just that my loyalty is not mine to give. Luffy grinned cheekily, like he knew a secret Igaram didn't. Somehow, I'm not surprised by that. Igaram tried not to read too far into that statement. It could just be an observation. No need to be overly paranoid. He paused and glanced over at the princess, who had not relaxed the whole time. If I may ask, what's going to happen to Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday? Oh, those two. We offered the choice to the baseball dude as soon as we docked. He picked us right away. He's actually dancing out there. Now that he looked, Igaram did indeed spot Mr. Nine among the heaving throng. He noticed that Miss Monday was on a beeline straight for him. No surprise there. Those two were the worst-kept secret in Baroque Works. As for her, Nami won't let us let her go yet. She said something about a queen's ransom or something like that. Igaram's blood turned to ice. Ew. His accusation was cut off by Luffy's hand moving like lightning to grab something out of the air. He stood up and turned, an annoyed look on his face. Oi, bomb guy. Didn't your grandpa ever hit you on the head when you tried to flick boogers at strangers? Wait, what? The party ground to a halt as everyone turned to look at Luffy for such an odd comment. Then they followed his line of sight to find two figures standing up from where they'd apparently been crouching on a nearby rooftop. The man was black with his hair styled in a bunch of little tails extending out from his scalp, almost like an explosion. His black trench coat had a prominent 5 emblazoned over his heart. The woman had blonde hair and blue eyes, and clearly had a thing for lemons. Her dress was adorned with them on top of being that sour shade of lemon yellow. She wore lemon earrings, and her hat looked like someone cut a lemon the size of a watermelon in half and hollowed it out. Both had arrogant smirks on their faces, but they seemed a little stilted. The millions that hadn't gone turncoat perked up. Mr. 5, Miss Valentine, thank goodness you're here. With you to rescue us, our fate is assured, called a woman dressed like a nun. Mr. 5 stuck a finger up his nose. Don't flatter yourselves. We're not here to help trash like you. Miss Valentine sniggered. Kai-ha-ha-ha. Like we'd come to this end of the Grand Line for a handful of millions. If you were weak enough to get captured, you're clearly of no use to Baroque Works. Those hopeful faces fell. It was just as Luffy had said. They were disposable. For some, the realization broke what will they had left. For others, it made them reconsider their choice to stay out of piracy. Luffy huffed. Hey, bomb guy, I asked you a question. What were you thinking, flicking an explosive into my party? The officer agent grunted. So these weaklings blabbed on our powers, did they? They'll pay for that. In any case, we're here to deal with 2 traitors. As an assassin, I thought it best to take them out without being seen and be on our way. But now that we're called out, let's negotiate. Hand them over and we'll leave the rest of you in peace. So you can run to your boss and send a big enough force to silence us. I don't think so. Besides, you'd have gotten me and a few others with that little gift, so don't pretend you're worried about any of our safety. Luffy tilted his head. But I'm curious, who are these traitors that merit a visit from you two? Mr. Five reached into his pocket for something. These two traitors are members of certain kingdom that infiltrated Baroque Works 2 years ago. They did something unforgivable in our boss's eyes. He told us only this, they know my secret. What this secret is, even we don't know. But keeping that secret is one of the core tenets of our organization. And the traitors that discovered his secret are. Mr. Five pulled out 2 faded photographs, showing Miss Wednesday and Mr. 8, Princess Nefertari Vivi of Arabasta and Igaram, captain of the Royal Guard. The millions were shocked to discover the true identities of 2 of their own. And the Armada was a little shocked as well. You're a princess, shrieked Mr. 9 at the revealed Vivi, who only bowed her head. Man, that chick's a princess. There go my chances. Oh, unless she's tired of soft princely types and wants to slum it with a real man's man, muttered a blushing Moji. I didn't hear all that, but I feel that it was faintly ridiculous, self-aggrandizing, and objectifying. So I'll do this on her behalf, stated Kadu, before slapping the beast tamer upside the head. Oh dear, I terrorized a princess. That goes against everything I was raised to believe and behave. Kaya suddenly sunk into a cloud of depression. Father and Mother in heaven, forgive this grievous breach of the code of conduct. I was unspeakably disrespectful of royalty itself. Think fondly of me as I rot in hell for my sin. Usopp hastily tried to talk his girlfriend back from the edge. Now, Kaya-chan, don't be depressed. There's no way you could have known. Luffy just raised a brow and turned to Igaram. Really? You guys had to go undercover to find out it was Crocodile. I mean, who else could it be? Name one other person with enough of a foothold in Arabasta to pull all that stuff off with enough money and a criminal background. I mean, who did you think that it was? Revolutionaries. Some petty and pissed-off world noble hung up on the Nefertari family abstaining way back when. Some corrupt magnate hoping to make your economy collapse and make a killing. Actually, now that I think about it, there are a few other options. Sorry for thinking you're an idiot. Every Baroque Works agent there froze. Miss Valentine's smirk wavered a little. Kaihahaha. What's that you're babbling about? Something about a crocodile. Luffy looked at the 2 officer agents like they were idiots. Believe you me, that is not a nice look to receive from Luffy. No, crocodile. The Shichibukai bastard. He's your boss. That's the big secret. The pair's stoic facade shattered into expressions of horror and disbelief somewhere between a self-proclaimed god meeting his natural enemy and a long-nosed coward coming face to face with death. There was snot involved. It wasn't pretty. Patty narrowed his eyes. Okay, just how does this kid know all this stuff? The Don knows everything. Defended a nearby Krieg pirate. That Urnami-sensei told him, offered a black cat. Ah, that makes sense. Mr. Five recovered and looked furtively at the sky. Once he'd had a good look around, he seemed to relax. Whether what you say is true or not, the fact remains that our mission is to kill those 2. So are you going to hand them over quietly? Or is this going to get loud? Miss Valentine opened his parasol and cocked it on her shoulder. Kaihahaha. Just be a good little pirate and give them to us. You have a hard enough time with the Marines after you. Why add an international crime syndicate to it? I mean, really, what's it matter to you what happens to these 2? Luffy wriggled his nose. It mattered to me because Curly Hair is a good guy. I don't want him to die. And my navigator wants to ransom Vivi. And I'd pick a fight with Crocodile over her any day of the week. So looks like we're going to fight. Luffy took an exaggerated look around the town square. I'm not usually one to play the numbers card, but it seems there's a whole lot of us and only 2 of you. Sure you don't want to just walk away quietly? The twosome's smiles shifted into snarls. Don't talk down to us, you no-name pirate, bellowed Mr. Five. It bore mentioning that the more mobile agents rarely had reliable access to a news coup. The 2 of us are officer agents. We are the 6th most powerful team in all of Baroque Works, with the power of the devil fruits behind us. He swung his arm out to his side, and an explosion encompassed his fist, startling some of the more inebriated of the crew. I ate the Bamu no Mai. I can make any part of my body turn into a bomb. Miss Valentine hopped up and seemed to float in place. Kaihahaha. And I ate the Kilo no Mai. I can change my weight at will to anything from 1 kilo to 10,000 kilos. I can float like a feather or crush you like a boulder. A sinfully smooth hand went up in the air, pulled up, called out Alvida, drawing everyone's attention. You're telling me that you can lose weight without even trying? Miss Valentine cocked her head. Kaihahaha. Yes, I am. What's it to you? Iron Mace Alvida lost her mind. Hiyah, she roared, leaping clear to the rooftop and bringing down her mace hard enough to demolish the 2-story house. Mr. Five leapt to the side, while Miss Valentine went high up in the air. What the hell? she gaped. Come back down here and take your pounding like the bitch slut you are. This is for fat girls everywhere. Sanji gaped. Is this going to be a cat fight? His blood and that of every red-blooded male in earshot ran in the streets. Mr. Five picked himself up, only to find himself face to face with an eerily calm blonde. I suppose I'll handle you myself. If I don't start pulling my own weight around here, people might accuse me of being a one-dimensional character. What is she talking about? Asked Siam. Pretty sure it's a Yander thing. Who knows what they're thinking, answered Butcheye. Usopp felt a weight in his guts, but he plastered a smile and gave a thumbs up. Go, Kaya-chan. Kick his ass. The battle between the Mr. Five pair and Luffy's untested female Nakama had begun. The night was quite simply beautiful. The moon, a waning gibbous just a few days short of a half, shone brightly in the sky. Smash! The stars twinkled merrily on those down below, offering proof that the sun was hardly starved for company as well as mystery to he who looked on them with a child's wonder. Crunch! Waves lapped gently at the shore, never truly still, the water stretching out into the horizon. Rumble! The wind whistled along the dusty ground and around the barren hills, stark and dry and lovely in their own way. Boom! And two women built like models were trying to murder each other. Simply beautiful. Alvida held her kanabo up into the side in a picture-perfect baseball stance. She swung for a point a bit below Miss Valentine's armpit. Should it make contact, it would at the very least crack a rib. Given the sheer amounts of adrenaline running through her taut, supple body, it would not be a surprise if the blow sent the blonde assassin soaring off into the middle distance. Unfortunately, she struck nothing but air. Miss Valentine had already reduced her weight as far as her power allowed her and jumped into the air before Alvida started moving. She actually kicked off of the end as it passed under her to accelerate her journey skyward. She'd barely made it 10 feet before her vector suddenly reversed, coming back toward the ground with all the destructive power of a meteor. A crater formed beneath her high heels as she made compact. Sadly, there was no blood in that crater. Alvida had followed the momentum of her swing to run to the side. She planted her foot, turned, and leapt back towards her opponent with her weapon running parallel to her spine as she held it above her head. Describing a perfect arc, the smooth-skinned pirate brought her hands up, over, and down. The centripetal force of the stroke added to the mass of the solid steel staff and the acceleration provided by rage-fueled muscles to create an even more powerful attack than the last. Feeling like she was playing an extremely high-stakes game of jump rope or leapfrog, the officer agent once again launched herself into the air. Beneath her, the crater she'd created doubled in diameter and depth as Alvida's strike hit the spot she'd just been standing on. Deciding she needed time to create a strategy, Miss Valentine opened her umbrella and began to float above the battlefield. Alvida jerked her weapon out of the cracked earth and looked up at the woman she had deemed her arch-nemesis the second she learned of her devil fruit power. Stay still so I can hit you, you cheater. She roared with all the fury of a sugar addict who found that someone else had eaten the last Klondike bar. Kai-ha-ha-ha. I will when you will, crazy. Feel free to start first. The Baroque Works agent fired back. Alvida blew actual clouds of steam out her nostrils, so hot were the flames of her anger. Through the phenomenon psychologists have termed transference, Alvida had redirected all the hatred and self-loathing she'd felt over her weight her entire life onto the woman taunting her from the air. In her mind, beating this woman would cleanse every bad feeling she'd ever had. In reality, though she might experience some mild catharsis, those feelings would remain unresolved until she fully confronted and processed their root. But she didn't know that. All she knew was that 26 years of negative emotion was urging her spill blood, and she was more than happy to oblige. Not that Miss Valentine knew any of that, so she underestimated the impact of her next words. Why are you so bent out of shape about my ability, anyway? Did little Miss Size Zero used to be chubby? Or are you just hung up on those pesky 5 pounds of cellulite left over from winter? Kai-ha-ha-ha. Get over it, twig. The officer agent gave her most mocking smile. She wasn't just being mean. The angrier the target was, the more likely they were to leave an opening. That it was also fun to tear people down was just a bonus. Alvida actually felt something snap inside her brain. Her limbs, already numbed from adrenaline, seemed to vanish from her awareness. Her entire vision focused on the laughing yellow bitch. Everything else reduced to a fuzz. She started to feel dizzy from just how strong the all-encompassing rage had taken hold of her being. Some tiny, sane corner of her mind noted, so this is what a stroke feels like. The rest of her thought processes could be summarized as RAAGH. Miss Valentine blinked, her brain refusing to accept what her eyes were sending her. The moment passed, and suddenly she was increasing her weight as fast as she could. Her moment of hesitation was almost her undoing. She just barely managed to drop enough that the spinning 70-kilogram spiked bat didn't brain her. She landed roughly and stumbled. It was a good thing she did, because if she'd stuck it, her head would have been in prime position for half-inch long nails to claw. Miss Valentine, still reeling from the suddenness of the assault, had to rely on every bit of her dodging training to avoid the downright feral flurry of blows Alvida aimed at her. If Alvida's pupils were to vanish, her teeth transform into a shark's, and her hair start to writhe like live snakes, none of it would have seemed out of place. She had crossed the line between outraged and possessed. She wasn't behaving like a woman so much as a rabid, starving animal with inoperable hemorrhoids. She wasn't fighting to win anymore. She was fighting to hurt. Not that she was having much success. She was attacking with nothing but instinct and impulse. And all her experience with fighting was with her mace. And her opponent, contrary to the stereotype about blondes, was slightly above average intelligence and an assassin besides. Not that there was an actual school or anything, but most people in that line of work learn early on that not getting hit was the key to staying alive. After all, most opponents' assassins face are other assassins, and one hit was all that was needed sometimes to end a life. Suffice to say that Alvida, after a solid minute, had yet to even touch Miss Valentine. After processing that her enemy had actually made the incredibly stupid decision to throw away her weapon and adapting to the new pace of battle, Miss Valentine was ready to return fire herself. Hopping back a bit, the Baroque Works operative reeled back her fist. Enough of this. 10,000-kilo ram. Miss Valentine launched her fist forward. Her normally dainty arm turned into an unstoppable missile by the power of her devil fruit. It moved closer and closer until finally making contact with soft, breakable flesh, only to keep on moving. The blonde woman overbalanced as her fist seemed to just glide off into the side of the face she'd been aiming at. As she fell forward, she didn't get caught on her opponent's body. Instead, she seemed to just slip past her as if they were like magnets passing by. To her credit, Miss Valentine didn't fall flat on her face. She managed to roll and come up standing, normalizing her weight by reflex. She turned to look at the other woman, shocked confusion stuck on her face. What the hell? Alvida regained just a bit of her higher functions, enough to turn and smirk tauntingly. You're not the only one with a devil fruit, blonde bimbo. Seizing the moment, Alvida brought her arm around in the mother of all bitch slaps. The sensation was odd for Miss Valentine. She could feel tiny points of contact, but nothing as big as the palm that actually touched her. And even as she became aware of those points of contact, they were already moving, sliding along her cheek and over her nose, never staying still long enough to properly deliver the energy behind the impact. It was like getting hit by a pool noodle made of feathers. She could feel a rigid core somewhere in there, but the actual contact was light and silky and negligible. Alvida stumbled, barely managing to catch herself. She looked down at her hand in horror, then looked up at Miss Valentine, whose face was slowly curling into her usual grin. So, your ability makes it so I can't touch you, but it looks like you can't touch me either. She paused, her sharp mind reviewing her failed punch. I could have sworn I felt your clothes as I fell, so it seems to be centered on your skin. But let's make sure, shall we? So saying, Miss Valentine brought her foot up in a kick to the fork in Alvida's legs. She didn't change her weight, in case her experiment failed and she missed again, which was why Alvida merely got the wind knocked out of her instead of a broken pelvis. With the jeans between her and the foot, there was enough friction for the kick to make contact and the kinetic energy to wreak its havoc on her body. The straw hat pirate of a day and a half bent forward slightly as her body curled around the point of impact. She might not be a man, but that was still an unpleasant area to be hit. Alvida felt her blood run cold, realizing that she wasn't nearly as invulnerable as Luffy had led her to believe. But when she looked up and saw the triumphant smirk on her face, Alvida stopped caring. All she cared about was returning the pain she'd just endured tenfold. And if her memory served her right, fingernails were made of keratin, not skin. Lashing out, Alvida raked her nails at and down Miss Valentine's face. She barely managed to break skin with her middle finger, but her hand caught on the neckline of the other's dress and came away with a fair-sized swath. Legs still held up from her kick, Miss Valentine reached up to feel her scratch and looked down at her left breast, cupped in white lace, exposed to the world. Something in her mind clicked, and she stopped caring about her pride as an assassin in favor of her pride as a woman. Snarling, "Oh, it is on." Miss Valentine tackled Alvida to the ground and proceeded to try and reduce her to pulp. Alvida enthusiastically returned the sentiment. This wasn't some petty catfight like you'd see at the mall, with flapping of arms at the air and tugging of ears. Both girls were out for blood. Alvida's traction-free skin made that difficult for both parties, but they did their best anyway. Both of their hats were soon lost in the conflict. Alvida quickly learned that headbutts did nothing but strain her neck. Miss Valentine could punch any part covered by Alvida's coat, but lacked the angle or leverage to make it stick while they were rolling around. Alvida's teeth weren't slippery and she managed to latch onto Miss Valentine's earlobe. She almost managed to get enough pressure to tear it clean off when she felt a hand on her bikini and then an excruciating pressure. Letting go, she wriggled out of the grip, sliding along the ground like a wet bar of soap. She caught herself before she went too far, and found she was in the perfect position to crush the blonde's nose beneath her shoe. Miss Valentine shook her head, blood getting caught in her hair, and grabbed the hem of the pirate's pants and pulled. Rather than bringing her opponent back in reach, she wound up with a pair of capris in the sight of Alvida scrambling to her feet before jumping on her back. She tried to buck her off, but didn't manage it before she felt two hands grab huge chunks of her hair. With her new leverage, Alvida started to bash Miss Valentine's head into the ground. The assassin scrambled to escape, but she didn't have the neck strength to rip her hair out by the roots, and her hands slipped as she tried to grasp the offending arms. Her ears were starting to ring before she made the split-second decision to reduce to 1 kilogram. As Alvida pulled her head back up, she wound up pulling Miss Valentine right up and out from between her legs. She let go at the disorientation and short fall to the ground, giving Miss Valentine enough time to center herself and normalize, so she fell on Alvida's back. Thinking fast, the femme fatale dug her right arm under Alvida's neck and grabbed the wrist with her left. She pulled back and discovered to her delight that, unnaturally smooth as she was, Alvida's head couldn't slip down past Miss Valentine's forearm. The gap was just too small without dislocating or concaving her jaw. Acting fast, Miss Valentine wrestled the struggling woman around so she was lying atop her, back to front. In a triumphant hiss, the blonde said 10,000-kilo guillotine. The arm across Alvida's throat went from an uncomfortable pressure to an industrial press. She choked, gasping for air that wasn't there. Darkness started to cloud her vision as it felt like her windpipe was about to collapse under the sheer weight. She was being crushed. She was going to die. She was going to die. Alvida brought up her hands to try and move the terrible pressure, but she just couldn't get a good enough grip. Even then, her desperate pulls were just too weak to make any difference. Alvida heard her heart beating like it was the biggest drum on the planet. She felt it push against the front of her chest, like it was trying to escape from her dying body and find a new one. As her vision faded, it got even louder, so it was impossible to miss that it started to slow down and stutter. Alvida made one last convulsive gurgle, but her lungs continued to burn. The beats got further and further apart. The silence between them seemed to become deeper, darker, heavier. How simple it would be to sink down into that perfect quiet, to become wrapped in a blanket of dark, to find a peace as cold and undisturbed as a field of snow. White snow. White, white. She could see a light. It was so very pretty. She heard the words from far away. So much for that pounding you were going to give me. I guess fat girls everywhere will be disappointed. Fire bloomed in her chest. Her heart picked up in a defiant surge, and the light was replaced by the night sky. Alvida grit her teeth. She was not going to die here. Not unless she was taking this smug hack with her. Her oxygen-starved brain tried to cobble together a plan. She couldn't move the arm up or off her. She couldn't slide her head down past the arm. But could she slide her body up past it? With the last of her strength, Alvida planted her feet on the ground and pushed. Had Miss Valentine used a proper sleeper hold, the Iron Mace pirate might well have met her end that night. Instead, Alvida shot like a cork out of her captor's arms. She also managed to slide out of her coat, which led to her moving along the ground like a curling stone on ice. She came to a stop against the wall of a house almost at the end of the street she and Valentine had been fighting on. And what would you know? That house was right next to where her Kanabo had landed. After taking a few seconds to savor the sweetest air she'd ever tasted, Alvida got back on her feet. She walked over and heaved her weapon up to rest on her shoulder. Looking back where she came, she found her rival dusting herself off, her umbrella already back in hand. Alvida had done enough damage to her dress that she might as well not have been wearing it. Miss Valentine seemed to come to the same conclusion, ripping the tatters off of her and throwing them aside. They faced each other, neither caring they were only in their undergarments and shoes. It mattered not what armor a warrior wore. It mattered only how much of their enemy's blood they could stain it with. Alvida blew a stray lock of hair out of her face. Her brush with death had knocked her out of her berserker rage. Brute force had proved ineffective. It was time to fight smarter, not harder. Every time I try to hit her, she dodges into the air. And sooner or later, I'm going to be too slow to dodge her when she comes back down. She's working out the weaknesses of my fruit, so I shouldn't let her get too close. But I can't just run away from her. I need a way of hitting her hard and fast, before she can jump. Alvida took a moment to notice the distance between them. I slid pretty far. Well, that's the thing about having super smooth skin. According to Newton's first law, inertia will keep an object moving until acted on by an outside force, and that force is usually friction. Yes, she knew physics. She'd grown up fat and friendless. There wasn't much to do but read and eat. Frictionless surfaces, the holy grail of ground transportation. If a vehicle could coast on one, then the energy requirements would be greatly reduced. It'd just move along at the same speed it started. Didn't I read about something like that? Oh yes, that bit on magnetic levitation in that book on those theoretical transport devices called train. Those random thoughts, doubtless a lingering effect from her asphyxiation, sparked something in the depths of her head. Carefully, Alvida slipped off her left shoe and felt the ground. She adjusted her weight slightly, working out what patches of skin weren't affected by her power. Miss Valentine started to shout. You might as well just give up, you greasy slut. If you do, I might even make it quick. We're going to kill all of you. The princess, her bodyguard, and all you dumb pirates stupid enough to interfere with our mission. You think you bunch of rookies can go up against an organization like Baroque Works? I'm going to crush every last one of you like bugs, and then Mr. Five will turn your bodies into dust. And if any of them are even half as crazy as you, we wouldn't just be completing our mission, we'd be doing a public service. Alvida settled her stance, her gambit prepared. Are you done? It was remarkable how a face so pretty could twist into something so ugly. Forget about quick, I'll do you slow. Alvida's response was to kick off with her right shoe. Spur, she shouted, suddenly moving incredibly fast at Miss Valentine, balanced on her left foot as it slid along the ground like it was butter. Miss Valentine was too surprised to dodge the attack. Luckily for her, it wouldn't have hit anyway. Alvida had kicked off at the tiniest bit of an angle and wound up passing by a yard to the blonde's left. Before she'd gone too far, Alvida brought down her right foot. Her shoe absorbed the momentum and brought her to a halt with minimal sliding. Twisting herself, Alvida aimed herself once more and launched herself at impressive speeds toward her nemesis. This time, Miss Valentine had enough presence of mind to jump. She opened her umbrella and watched as Alvida skidded to a halt. A brief note on the kilo no mai. It allowed a user to change his or her weight to anything between 1 and 10,000 kilograms at will. But what exactly is weight? In layman's terms, it is the pull of gravity on the mass of an object. The mechanism of the kilo no mai, as well as its cousin the ton no mai, was to use a localized version of the power given by the devil fruit most recently eaten by a man named Ischo. Weight was changed by the increase or decrease of the user's gravity field. This is why the user did not change shape. Their mass was unaffected. And since the user's mass was unaffected, their muscles did not get larger or denser to help a user move under increased gravity the same as they would normal gravity. This was the reason Miss Valentine didn't just go to 10,000 kilograms and become a rampaging juggernaut. She couldn't really move when she was that heavy. That's why most of her attacks tended to involve falling on an opponent or shifting her weight while already moving and relying on her momentum to move her. Conversely, she didn't lower her weight and become super fast because her muscles would begin to atrophy at lower gravity, much like an astronaut's. And the reason she didn't just tank attacks was, to reiterate, her mass was unaffected by her fruit. So even though she might be 10,000 kilograms, she was 10,000 kilograms of flesh and blood. The only difference her weight made to how she took attacks was how fast she fell. Hence her hard work at her ability to move out of the way of hits. We now return to the fight. Miss Valentine narrowed her eyes before resuming her usual smirk. Neat trick, but you still can't hit me from all the way down there. And if you throw that glorified baseball bat again, you're dead meat. Kai-ha-ha-ha. Alvida measured Miss Valentine's position in the air with calculating eyes. I hope this works, she muttered to herself. Then she kicked off once more with her right foot. Only this time, she didn't direct the force in a straight line, but in a curve. Alvida started to spin in a circle like an ice skater despite being on dry land. Her features blurred at her speed, spinning around and around without any loss of energy. Miss Valentine gaped. What the hell? Suddenly planting her right foot in the ground, Alvida channeled the considerable centripetal force of her rotation into her kanaba, angling her shoulders just so. She let her projectile loose with a cry of subhammerthrow. Given Alvida's level of experience with her ability, it was luck more than anything that led to her aim being true. But true it was. Before Miss Valentine knew what happened to her, she caught what was as good as a ballista bolt in the solar plexus. At only 1 kilogram, she did practically nothing to impede its flight, her world consumed in pain. The officer agent was sent flying along the arc of the Kanabo, ending only when it met one of the far-off cactus hills. The Kanabo fell to the ground below. Miss Valentine, her body sunk a good inch into the spherical graveyard, slowly fell forward, body limp, bloody foam leaking from her mouth. She too succumbed to gravity's embrace and came crashing down to earth. Alvida huffed. Damn, but that had been exhausting. Her abs were on fire from the effort it had taken to remain upright during her spin rather than falling flat on her ass. And all that freelance demolition she'd done while caught up in her righteous fury was starting to catch up with her. Oh, and her body was still recovering from the fact she'd nearly died. But however many aches and pains racked her, Alvida couldn't help but smile. I won. Disappointing. Alvida whipped her head around. Nami was leaning against the wall of the building next to her. Her face was flat as her chest was convex. Alvida felt whatever anger hadn't been worked out by beating Miss Valentine refocus on the navigator. Well, excuse me for not putting on a good enough show. It's not like I only got my powers yesterday and am still working out how this new body works. And sure, I almost lost at one point, but I won in the end, didn't I? Seniority be damned. You don't have the right to talk smack about my fights. I wasn't talking about your fight. Nami cut her off. That was decent, all things considered. Nami raised her hand to point, her expression still devoid of any emotion whatsoever. I was talking about that. Alvida followed her Nakama's line of sight, her view unimpeded thanks to all the buildings she'd reduced to rubble. She noticed the town square where this whole debacle had started. It was the scene of a massacre. The men of the Straw Hat Armada were spread out on the ground. Their eyes were blank and unseeing, their bodies still but for some random twitching. Some of them laid hanging off the edge of rooftops or embedded in walls as if they'd been thrown around by a giant. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, on their clothes, on the ground. It was so thick it had started to become rust-red mud. In the center of the carnage, soaked from head to toe and lying in an inch of the stuff, was none other than Sanji himself. He, along with every single one of the rest of the men, had a shit-eating grin on his face. Alvida mentally replayed the fight as it must have looked from a third-person view, and looked down at her half-torn bikini top and sweat-soaked panties. When she looked up, her face was as unimpressed as Nami's. You're right, that is disappointing. Mr. Five was not having a good day. First, he'd been awakened by a kick to the head by his partner, shrieking that she couldn't take his snoring for one more second. Well, what did she expect? He had a very congested nose. That's how he had so much ammo to use. They'd been assigned together for over a year. She should have gotten used to it by now, or at the very least bought some earplugs. Next, he'd had to eat her cooking for breakfast. When it came to desserts, or really anything with chocolate in it, she might as well be a gourmet chef from Poochie. For everything else, the safest word Mr. Five had found to describe it was interesting. As in that eel and cabbage stew was very interesting, or what an interesting idea to put pickled kiwi jam on toast. He'd rather gnaw on hardtack, but they were too well supplied for him to get away with it. Plus, if he insulted her culinary skills, he'd get a 200-kilo kick to the balls, and he was not eager to experience one of those again. Then, he'd had to take a very terse call from the boss, reminding them of the deadline for their mission. It was bad enough they had to sail to the ass end of the Grand Line without his superior breathing down his neck. Really, they were officer agents. In-house cleaning was beneath them, even if the guilty parties were frontier agents. Mr. Five resolved to get a few extra hits in on this Princess Vivi. Why'd she have to get nosy and look into the boss's secret and drag them out to deal with her? After that, it was a long, boring day of sailing following the eternal pose to Cactus Island. Fending off sea kings got boring when all that was needed to send them running was to flick a booger. Still, he preferred those brief interludes over pretending to listen to Miss Valentine's chatter. That woman could not go 5 minutes without hearing her own voice, though Mr. Five consoled himself over the day with the fact he could have been assigned to Miss Merry Christmas. She made Miss Valentine look like a mime. Vivi and Igaram are held at ransom by Nami. Unluckies turn up to be converted by Robin. Dogpile. She handles everything gracefully, gives tools and many armed hugs, goes on ahead to set up everything in Arabasta, leaves behind a ship for the infiltration crew, the Magpie. Hacky training starts during trip. Reach Little Garden for supplies. Crew bathed in bug spray. Usopp leads expedition for Brogy, Luffy for Dory, Sanji and Zoro have hunting contest rematch. Nami and Alvida bond. No Mr. 3 because of Robin's arrangements. Kizaru shows up, questions the Stooges. We'll die before we talk. I believe you. Luffy loses his shit gear forth all over the island fighting Kizaru. Constant Conquerors messes with his concentration just enough to make his power lose its edge. Luffy charges through Kusanagi no Tsurugi to land Gamu Gamu no Panzerschreck into the volcano. Luffy lost all skin. 3rd and 4th degree burns. Kadu goes on rant about how a trained monkey can do what she does. Kaya shakes head and says she can only add a few hours, then we'll make those hours count. Giants respect Luffy and are all prepared to deal with Island Eater until Sanji kicks up, Zoro slices, Usopp bombs, Brook freezes wave, Nami melts path through. Curly, Mo and Shemp's cousin, takes place of Stooges for color commentary and buggy navigation. Piggyback Laboon, fly past Wapple. Very heated confrontation with Dalton until Zoro cuts through tension like a knife. Teams split up in search. Animals, Nami and Baroque stay at Bighorn. Usopp, Alvida, Kaya, and Kadu carry Luffy, Zoro to Lug Tram, and Barady head for Ropeway near Jayasta. Dawn crew actually go for Jayasta. Buggy crew heads for Cocoa Weed. Black Cats make for Robel. Sanji and Brook book for Arendelle and Phil to search for Chopper and Kira. Turns out at Castle, emergency surgery prevents reunion. Chopper needs blood at SAP. Crews decide to climb but won't make it in time. Usopp instructs Nami and Valentine to build makeshift hot air balloon to transport Dalton's blood bank. 5 explodes handholds for Baroque. Django hypnotizes skills into cats. Buggy floats whole crew up, straining entire body in process. Dons decide to shimmy up the rope. Brook and Sanji do their own thing. Touch and go. Nami has bright idea to gather snow for water and prep for Arabasta. Of course Wapol shows up, but Dalton and Drum have been inspired by the example of a king that Luffy has set and repel him all on their own. with assistance from the pets, who manage to forge an alliance with the Lapon. Luffy released under Chopper's supervision. I'll miss you too, Mom. Core crew explain how they knew so much since they slipped up so much in their panic. Armada blown away, Vivi starts to think. Arabasta. Luffy tracks down Sabo and unlocks his memory. They meet up with Ace, ASL lead smoker on Merry Chase, reminisce, introduce crew, reenact Brotherhood ceremony, exchange Vivre cards and maybe Den numbers. Luffy warns Ace just how powerful he is. Chopper hands scope notes taken during drum attack. Ace asks if he knows where he is to, uses voice to be sure. Ace decides to stick with Luffy. Tame Kung Fu Dugong, split into parties. Gaiman and animals stand guard. Luffy, Nami, Buggy Pirates, and Dawn Pirates make for Rainbase. Black Cat Pirates and Second Chance Pirates smoke out billions in Nanohana with Brook's supervision. Usopp, Kaya, Vivi, Mr. Nine, Miss Friday, Igaram, and Barady go to Kataria to meet with Koza and handle rebel plans. Sanji takes Karu to Alubarna to deal with Mr. Seven Pair and the royal plans. Zoro and Chopper lead ambush on officer agents at Spider's Cafe. Mr. 1, Buggy, Ms. Doublefinger, Alvida. Mr. 2, Jin. Mr. 3 to 5 and Valentine's. Ms. Golden Week, Django. Mr. 4, Pearl and Siam, Butchai. Ms. Merry Christmas, Moji, Richie and Kabaji. Robin takes down Crocodile with armament. Luffy puts the fear of God in him with conquerors. All meet up in Alubarna. Crocodile confesses to all with Luffy behind him. Smoker and Tashigi witness. Party to end all parties in the palace. Give Vivi same ultimatum. Crew stop by Poneglyph in the desert. Destroy Pluton as a group exercise. This thing can destroy the world, right? Well, I don't want that to happen. If the world gets destroyed, where will I get my meat? Laboon takes care of Hina. Bentham makes Akama crew. Guldino and Efremov Leonid are recruited to Second Chance crew. Vivi makes speech to country. Jackdawed whale speech. Go on record renouncing her titles. Becomes captain of Second Chance. New bounties. Luffy 603 faced Oni. Zoro 420 Buggy 75. Vivi only alive 19. Brook 66. Hijinks on open ocean. Brook, Django, and Leonida form unholy trinity of illusion. Much more cordial meeting with Messira after Galleon falls. Luffy tames giant turtle temporarily on Nami's order. Head straight for Cricket. Get him to convert Mary, Barady, and Big Top for the knock-up stream. Send crews into forest to hunt for South Birds while Core plus Ace head into Mock Town. Luffy and Ace head for pub for Bellamy and Teach. Rest spread out for 3 others in town. Just as they are positioning selves, Birdcage closes around the town. Turns out Doflamingo and the 3 Seats have come to eliminate the threat of Luffy and clear out the town in a joint operation, with Virgo providing transport. Becomes free for all with Ace versus Teach, Luffy versus Doflamingo, Straw Hats versus Blackbeard officers, Don Quixote officers, Marine Mooks, Zoro versus Diamante, Sanji versus Pika, Brook versus Treble, Robin versus Virgo, Usopp versus Van Augur, Chopper versus Jesus Burgess, Nami versus Doc Q, Kaya and Alvida work the goons. Ace ends up getting sucked into Teach and he flees like coward out of the cage. Luffy unveils Eidolon and recreates one of manga, debate how to deal with him before deciding to kill him. Crew shambles back to Cricket's house. Solemn mood ended by Luffy insisting a party, karaoke Amek. Next morning give a very specific heading to the Seabound cruise while 3 go to stream. Robin gives Cricket a Vivre card so he can follow them after hearing the bell. Black Cat, Dawn, Second Chance, Akama, and Sarayama find themselves on an island overrun by plant from the ruins, Lotus Eaters. Brook taken out early by Lotus. Most delicious thing to ever pass my tongue. Except I don't have a tongue. Skull joke. All minor characters get an arc as they fight to abandon castle where root of the plant is. Repel Wiper. Make to Angel Beach. Luffy calls out Enel from Kenneth's house. Use armament to block retaliatory strike. No need for Shrimp to steal the boats. They set off right after dealing with White Berets. Since Luffy and co. did ordeal of balls in first timeline, so 3 ships take 3 other ordeals. Buggy does ordeal of string. Barady take ordeal of swamp. Elm and his perfect ordeal of iron get demolished by the Straw Hats. Kaya gets Eyes and Whip as gift and to make her combat worthy. All meet up at Sacrificial Altar, Bonfire, meet Clabberman of Mary. Next day, split up. Barady goes on ingredients expedition, running into Shandians and Divine Soldiers. Buggy and Nami head for Maxim for the Moolah. Robin, Usopp, and Kaya go to recheck ruins. Luffy tames Nola to give him ride to Enel's shrine while rest of crew try to minimize casualties. Luffy and Enel face off. The guy manages to hit every single one of Luffy's buttons with his god complex rant. Alvida ends up dealing with Wiper. Luffy ends up beating him within an inch of his life and using Conquerors to pointy breaks. Ring the bell, end the war. Enel ends up like Gilderoy. Luffy can't bring himself to leave to Shandy and Justice when he has no memory of his sins. Feels responsible, so recruits to core crew. Navarone, I think you're the nicest sociopath I've ever met. Reunite at Long Island Long Land with Tanjit and Shelley, Foxy for a nice vacation. Test out Gear R. Ends up dismissing all crew members stolen to go own way. Leaves Foxy, Porch, Hamburg, Pickles, Big Pan, Itamizu and Chuchun, Capote and Monda and about 200 that want to stay. For Luffy's entrance, Nami darkens the sky with Black Ball. Then the Armada does stomp, clap, and we will rock you, to psych out the crew. Then transition into Eye of the Tiger by Brook, while training montage of Luffy plays on the clouds from Video Den Den. And he finally appears to X-Gon give it to you. All fun and games until Aokiji shows up. Lets Tanjit run away, verbal spar, then reveals Buster Call. First ship, Laboon and Brook. Second ship, Buggy. Third ship, Black Cats. Fourth ship, Dawn. Fifth ship, Second Chance. Sixth ship, Akama. Seventh ship, Sarayama. Eighth ship, Gaiman and Non-Canon. Ninth ship, Barady. 10th ship, Foxy. Strawberry, Zoro. Yamakaji, Sanji. Doberman, Nami and Usopp. Onagumo, Chopper. Stainless, Robin. Luffy vs. Kuzan. Battle lasts 2 days on shore. Crews recover from casualties out at sea. Unspoken rule not to interfere. You know, of all the admirals I've met, you're actually the one I respect least. Borsellino was broken. He just didn't care about the lives of others. The fact he managed to keep himself in line for so long is admirable. And Sakazuki, he's a zealot. As far as he's concerned, the will of the government is the will of God. He genuinely believes he is doing the right thing. He's willing to die for what he believes in. He's willing to kill for it. I want to beat him into a bloody pulp, but I can respect his dedication. But you're decent. You have a moral compass. You can think for yourself. At some point, you must have had a moment of doubt. You must have looked at all they've made you do, all they've made you give. You must have seen the hypocrisy, the moral excrement behind their actions. And yet you stayed. You took the path of least resistance. And that's why lazy justice is worse than absolute justice. The system demands sacrifice, that is true, but it's still the best we have. It keeps the world in order. Violence and tragedy abound, but at least it's predictable, it's manageable. If millions must die to preserve the peaceful lives of billions, that is a price I am willing to pay. I didn't start the system. I can't change it, so I keep it running. I do what I do to keep the world from falling into chaos, as I am forced to do yet again. Battle ends with Luffy melting off Kuzan's leg like in manga, leaves him alive because he's a neat guy. Sail punch drunk and battered into water 7. Frankie, already modified and aghast at state of the crew, gets multi-billion-berry investment to build them a fleet. Actually explore other 3 islands on train line. Sengoku points out to Garp the transcript. Luffy never promised to be Marine. Garp realizes he was played and regains unstoppable rage. Kidnaps Luffy and drags him to a Nai's lobby to transport him to Impel Down. Crew mounts a rescue mission. CP9 make to swoop in, but are crushed so they can deal with the real problem. Rocketman. Lore. Ace was captured by Marshal D. Teach. He was turned over to the government in exchange for the title of Shichibukai. A public execution will be set. Whitebeard will attack Marineford itself to stop it. It will come to be known as the War of the Best. Against all odds, Ace will be freed from his shackles. And just when it looked like he'd get away, Akinu struck a death blow. And he died in my arms. Died. You're speaking past tense, Luffy. I'm from the future, Gramps. You don't have to believe me. Just know that I saw a fist of magma go through my brother's chest. I saw the light leave his eyes. And I saw you stand by and do nothing. Because no matter how much you claim to love us, you love your justice more. And that's why I'll never be a Marine. And why I used you. And why I'd do it all again if I had to. These are my nakama. These are my crew. These are my family. If it's to protect our nakama, be it the government or the entire world, we would make anyone our enemy. That's what it means to be Straw Hat. Bounties after dust settles. Luffy 700. Zoro 560. Scorch Leg Sanji 228. Nami 133. Usopp 106. Monster Tanuki Chopper 110. Robin 189. Frankie 127. Brook 135. Alvida 50. Kaya 22. Enel 71. Kaku 82. Buggy 150. Acrobatic Kabaji 14. Moji, Richie 14, 5. Django 63. Sham, Butchai 31. Jin 78. Pearl 21. Red Leg Zeph reinstated. Mad Bomber Adaru Red 25. Human Wrecking Ball Godova 17, 5. Galdino 84. Leonida 9. Vivi 38. Bentham 169. Mont Blanc Cricket 54. Messira, Xiaoju. Foxy 47,999. Viking Funeral for Mary. She speaks to the crew as they say goodbye. The love of the whole armada gives her enough of a spirit for Brook to grab her and host her in his skeleton. Take on Florian Triangle. Find it in ruins. Turns out Brook's test iceberg diverted a school of fish, which led to them birthing in different places, which altered patterns just enough that Kraken's food was right near Thriller Bark, rears its ugly head. New Gaon Cannon can destroy island. Blasts hole and crews go in to get its heart. Kuma shows up, challenges Luffy to take all the pain of the entire armada, earns his respect and leaves. Perona tags onto core crew. Lola and Rolling Pirates left free because it's getting freaking crowded. But swear alliance. Rescue Kami. Duval debacle. Save slave at Grove 31, then go on to meet Shaki. Core crew spread out and buy. Free every slave on the archipelago. Buggy crew guards Kami with lives, so no kidnap scare. Luffy checks auction house for Rayleigh. Gets in bidding war with Charlos. End up conquering audience to render moot and talk to Ray. Once rest is over, Luffy gives heading so Armada can meet up with Whitebeard. All those deemed too weak stay behind with Flying Fish. He goes to Amazon Lily solo. Notelaw has sworn allegiance thanks to avenging Rocinante. Luffy is reasonably exhausted when arrives. To spare Margaret, Sweetpea, and Afelandra land directly in village. Request to meet Snake Princess, held in prison, who writes the law. Can I make an appeal? Better to ask forgiveness than permission. Hancock is told when docks, comes to check, tries to arbitrarily petrify but A she's a bitch and B even if Luffy has thoughts now, they're still pure, so fruit doesn't work. Execution in ring. KD Bacula. Curb stomp the sisters. The thing about observation. Doesn't matter if you have it if your opponent is faster. And the problem with armament. It only works if your opponent is weaker. Luffy ends up dueling Hancock herself. Decent duel. Red Hawk burns up coat and reveals back. I've heard the story around the island about your back. It's make-believe, but there must be something you don't want people to see. Luffy summoned to castle, asked if he recognizes. He does the exposition for once. Hancock challenges if he looks down on her for being a slave. Of course not. You were a victim. That doesn't make you weak. And it's certainly nothing to be ashamed of. The only ones at fault here are the Celestial Dragons for doing that to you. That plus story of Luffy liberating slaves and challenging Roswell and Nyan, she falls. Make request to go to Impel Down. Sisters rage but she agrees. Obligatory feast while Hancock falls love sick. Luffy hides under her cloak onto marine ship. Luffy and Boa have really good time on trip to Impel Down. Now that he grasps the whole marriage thing and is smart enough to carry a conversation. Hancock begs him not to make a fuss. Cheeky grin, kiss on cheek melts brain. Luffy uses level 1 entrance to 5.5. Blows through Nukama land to level 5. KD Den Mushy surveillance. Get to level 6. Free Ace and Jin. One crocodile's respect so grabs him too. And escapes back to level 5 before the lift even reaches level 6. Waited out in Nukama land until opportune moment. Chaos's Ace is discovered missing. Marine ships brought in to search the prison while Hancock sails away. Mother of all jailbreaks. Luffy stretches KD to max to knock out most of the Marines. Nukama, Ace, Jin, Crocodile do the rest. When run into Sadie, Ivankov handles her, while the 4-mem one-shot the jailer beasts. Magellan is waiting at level 3, along with Hannibal and 5 vice admirals. Luffy takes Magellan, Ace, Jin, Crocodile, Inazuma, Dazbones, Ivan handle other 6. To be immune to poison, Luffy uses armament, Cocoon, hardens the air around him. Nothing goes in or out, including oxygen, so use it in bursts. Eventual victory. Make for top floor. Saldeth almost a footnote. Luffy jams open the doors to Justice from monitor room. Sink every ship but one used to run away. They pass Blackbeard. Luffy holds back Ace. They have war to deal with. Doors open since Lafitte hypnotized. Descend into war. Marines use decoy to avoid admitting lost their precious hostage. Ace lands on ship on time to convince Squardo not to mutiny. Luffy has beef with Akainu. Plus they're locked in so continue with best defense is a good offense. Entire line of pacifista laid to rubble by Straw Hat crew. Ivankov tackles original. Luffy goes for Akainu but is intercepted by Garp. Zoro and Robin go for Akainu. Marco, Ace, and Sabo go for Kyuzen. Sanji and Jin take Fujitora. Whitebeard versus Sengoku. All this madness. Was it worth it? To remove the shadow of Roger over the world once and for all. A bargain at twice the price. Luffy goes full out Monkey King. God with Gear 5 and staff against Garp. Blackbeard shows up for dramatic reveal only to be smacked down like a little bitch. Flee with the Marines trounced and the ox bell rung. Luffy meets Shanks, offers the hat back. Shanks, it suits you more. Luffy orders Armada to fan out and train for 2 years. Includes core crew. Luffy and Hancock have a kid. Usopp becomes God with Pop Greens and Pluton and Vegapunk tech via Frankie. Assuming continuity isn't shot to hell, resume with new romance dawn. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.